Chapter 1327 Classifications of Quintessence 2. It was a sensation that reminded him of the relentless, rapid tides, carrying an imposing momentum that would blast through anything that stood in its path. For someone who had been in contact with his ancestors' flowing water swordsmanship from a very young age, Jian Qinsheng was extremely accustomed to that feeling. The both of them should have been at odds, but why would the young man suddenly emanate sword intent that was identical to his ancestors? Furthermore, judging from the overwhelming aura, it seemed like he was in the midst of reaching sword quintessence. Wung. In his moment of confusion, the swords in the hands of the sword practitioners in the area suddenly began shaking uncontrollably as their swords flew out of their sheaths. They swiftly fell to the ground, paying respects to their new emperor. He actually managed to reach sword quintessence. Jian Qinsheng muttered as he felt his throat running hoarse. Those who had comprehended sword quintessence would receive the blessings of the world. As long as a sword was not stronger than them, a sword quintessence expert would be able to force the sword to submit to them unconditionally. However, it was apparent that the young man before him had already comprehended sword quintessence, and for him to achieve yet another breakthrough now. It could not be that he had comprehended two different types of sword quintessence, could it? One must know that even achieving a single sword quintessence was a feat that most sword practitioners failed to achieve despite devoting their entire life to the sword. Yet, the young man before him was only in his 20s, and he had already comprehended two of them. More importantly, it was just a moment ago that he had said that it was impossible to comprehend two different sword quintessence simultaneously when the young man immediately made the breakthrough. "Must you really slap my face that quickly?" Jian Qinsheng's lips trembled uncontrollably as the entire world he had known collapsed right before his eyes. He had started practicing swordsmanship when he was 3, comprehended lower sword heart when he was 17, upper sword heart when he was 40, and sword quintessence when he was 63. Without a doubt, his talent was legendary, and there were countless who were envious of him. But in face of the young man before him, all those glorious accomplishments of his felt like an embarrassment instead. He has achieved the same sword quintessence as teacher. Shui Qianro widened her eyes in disbelief as her body trembled uncontrollably. Prior to coming over, the young man did not even know what the sword quintessence that her teacher had comprehended was, and yet, just by chatting a bit here and there, he suddenly attained the same sword quintessence as her teacher. One must know that she had cultivated under her teacher for many years, but despite that, she had only managed to grasp the bare basics of it. In this moment, the overwhelming sense of defeat that she felt rendered her completely incapable of speech. Who? A while later, Zhongxian finally reined in his aura before opening his eyes once more. This time, he walked unhesitatingly toward the sword character and placed his finger on it. In response to his touch, the character seemed to dance exuberantly, seemingly ready to fly out of its restraints and soar into the sky. Zhongxian turned to Jian Qinsheng and asked with a smile, "Elder Jian, can this be considered as having obtained the acknowledgement of the sword intent?" "Oh, of course." Jian Qinsheng's lips twitched a bit as he hurriedly nodded in response. Even the sword character left behind by his ancestor looked ready to elope together with the young man. What else could it be if not a sign of acknowledgement? That's a relief. Zhongxian patted his chest and sighed in relief. As soon as he had heard Jian Qinsheng say that it was theoretically possible to comprehend a second sword quintessence, he had immediately collected all of the insights and interpretations concerning the sword character into the library of Heaven's Path. Those who were qualified to leave their words beneath the sword character were all those who had reached or had been on the verge of reaching sword quintessence. Even though there was not too much of such text in the area, it was all incredibly insightful and concise, allowing him to compile a perfect manual. With prior experience in reaching sword quintessence, it was much easier the second time around, which was also the reason he had been able to achieve a breakthrough so quickly. The Compendium of Sword Arts is just right ahead. I'll open it for you now. Jian Qinsheng headed over the corner of the wall and pushed lightly, and the two sides of the wall slowly slid apart, revealing a door behind it. Thank you. I happen to have several doubts concerning swordsmanship that require verification from the books, and I'll leave once I'm done looking through the relevant books. With his eyes lit up in excitement, Zhongxian quickly explained his current situation to Jian Qinsheng before heading in. It had to be said that the collection of books in the Compendium of Sword Arts was truly amazing. It must have taken countless years before they managed to expand the compendium to such a scale. Taking a deep breath, Zhongxian began scanning the area with his eyes. Wherever his gaze fell, the books would automatically be replicated in the Library of Heaven's Path in neat rows. Walking in between the shelves, he quickly took in all the books around him. A moment later, Zhongxian suddenly halted his footsteps. The flowing water swordsmanship. To his surprise, there was actually a flowing water swordsmanship secret manual lying casually in one of the innermost bookshelves. But then, he suddenly remembered that he was currently in the Compendium of Sword Arts, a sacred ground where only those recognized by the ancestor of the Gen clan would be able to enter. Those who could enter already had their identities verified, so there were no qualms about leaving any secret manuals out in the open. After collecting the Flowing Water Swordsmanship secret manual, Zhongxian tapped on it lightly in the Library of Heaven's Path. Flowing water swordsmanship conceptualizes sword intent as a flowing stream of water, relentless and unending. Sword practitioners specializing in this swordsmanship will be able to form a tight guard of sword qi, thus granting them superior defensive prowess. This swordsmanship was created by the third sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, Zhen Liushui, and it's possible to achieve the level of sword quintessence through this conceptualization. Flaws. Zhongxian shook his head. It sure has plenty of flaws. Admittedly, the flowing water swordsmanship was extremely powerful. In terms of concept, it bore a striking resemblance to the Heaven's Path sword art, but it was a higher tier sword art, wielding far greater might. Currently, the Heaven's Path sword art that Zhongxian had compiled was only Saint Intermediate tier. He could easily overwhelm those of the same cultivation realm through its devastating strength, but its prowess was severely lacking when put against a Saint high-tier battle technique. On the other hand, while the flowing water swordsmanship was plagued with flaws, it had reached the level of Saint high tier. If he could master it, his fighting prowess would surely rise by leaps and bounds. To make a comparison, it was like the difference between a ballista and a crossbow. A crossbow was much more flexible and nimble in terms of usage, but in terms of prowess, it could not compare to a ballista. Zhongxian continued reading through the manual. This swordsmanship is highly demanding on one's eye of discernment. The flowing water swordsmanship required one to mold one's sword intent into a form reminiscent of flowing water. However, in order to successfully break down one's sword intent into a fluid and flexible form, one had to possess an eye of discernment far surpassing the ordinary. In fact, without the eye of insight, it was technically impossible to cultivate the technique up to the level of major accomplishment. No wonder Shui Chenro said that other than the third sanctum head, no one has succeeded in mastering the flowing water swordsmanship. From the looks of it now, the problem didn't lie in their lack of hard work or talent. Rather, their eye of discernment just wasn't up to par. As a past sanctum head of the Sanctum of Sages, the third sanctum head had possessed the eye of insight as well. It was probably because of that he was able to create such a powerful sword art. However, it was pity that none of the sanctum heads after him specialized in the sword, thus causing the lineage of this swordsmanship to be buried in the dust. As a descendant of Zhen Liushui, Zhen Qinsheng had tried his best to learn the flowing water swordsmanship, but without the eye of insight to peer directly into the very essence of the sword intent, he could only create a very crude conceptualization of water flow. It was no wonder he was not able to bring glory and honor to the swordsmanship. Possessing the eye of insight, the flowing water swordsmanship happened to be compatible with Zhongxian. Let me see if I can perfect the flowing water swordsmanship. If the flaws could be resolved, it would be worth considering practicing the sword art. With this thought in mind, Zhongxian continued his collection of books. In just 10 minutes, the 100,000 sword art manuals in the Compendium of Sword Arts were all within the Library of Heaven's Path. I'll see if I can perfect the cultivation technique of the 3 swords of Lingshu. Compile. Zhongxian retrieved the cultivation technique for the 3 swords of Lingshu and placed it together with all the other sword art manuals. His very purpose here was to perfect the 3 swords of Lingshu. Everything else could wait. Voila! A new book materialized before Zhongxian's eyes. Swiftly flipping it open, a deep frown was etched onto Zhongxian's forehead. Only one of the sword arts is perfected. The three swords of Lingshu consisted of three different sword arts, namely Sea-Severing Sword, Ocean Cataclysm Sword, and Heaven Desecration Sword. Each of these three moves was stronger than the previous. Even though Zhongxian's cultivation was only at leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, if he could fully execute Heaven Desecration Sword, putting aside Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivators, he would even be a match for Saint Seven Dan primary stage cultivator. It was due to this that the old sword maestro had been able to stand undefeated in the Empire Alliance. This compendium of sword arts had a massive collection of more than 100,000 sword art manuals, so Zhongxian had thought that he would be able to perfect all three sword arts by compiling them together. It was a little disappointing to see that only one sword art had been perfected after all that effort. Nevertheless, this was still better than nothing. Due to the three swords of Lingshu being a sword formation, even the very first move, the Sea-Severing Sword, had possessed more than 360 flaws. It would have been impossible to resolve all of them without that many books. Even though the Ocean Cataclysm Sword and Heaven Desecration Sword haven't been perfected yet, the number of flaws they have has also been greatly reduced. All in all, there's less than 10 for both of them. I'll just have to find a way to resolve them in the future. While he could not start cultivating the remaining two sword arts yet, the reduced number of flaws in them meant that it would be much easier for him to perfect them in the future. There are various different classifications to sword quintessences. The sword quintessence that Sanctum Head Jian Liushui comprehended leans more toward defense, whereas the one that the old sword maestro comprehended leans more toward offense. Through the knowledge of the books he had gathered, many aspects concerning swordsmanship became much clearer to Zhongxian. Since there are sword quintessences that are directed toward offense and defense, there should be those that are directed toward speed and agility too. These theories were explained in one of the books that Jian Liushui had left behind. As there were simply too many books within the compendium, Zhongxian would have probably overlooked them if he had not collected everything into the Library of Heaven's Path. Perhaps it was because Jian Qinsheng did not see the book, so he only knew that there were classifications to sword quintessences but not what kind of classifications there were. Let me try out the flowing water swordsmanship. With a thought, Zhongxian placed all the defensive sword art manuals together with the flowing water swordsmanship secret manual. Hula! A brand new book materialized, and with a tap, the knowledge within flowed into Zhongxian's head. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. It's perfected. Perhaps due to Jian Liushui's swordsmanship lineage being more sided toward defensive swordsmanship, the proportion of defensive sword art manuals were far higher than offensive sword art manuals. This made perfecting the flowing water swordsmanship secret manual much easier than perfecting the three swords of Lingshu. I'll cultivate this one first then. Since Zhongxian had managed to perfect the flowing water swordsmanship, he quickly found a quiet place in the compendium to sit down and start studying. Just as the name suggested, the flowing water swordsmanship required the sword practitioner to cultivate their swordsmanship until their sword qi was as fluid and flexible as water, flowing relentlessly like a seemingly unending river. Once mastered, the sword practitioner would be able to put up a perfect guard that boasted even greater defensive power than a dominion. Going through the perfected flowing water swordsmanship in his head, Zhongxian focused his mind, and gradually, his zhenqi formed small little blades that circulated within his body. The hardest aspect of the flowing water swordsmanship was not to convert one's zhenqi into swords. Zhongxian had been able to do that for a very long time, but to convert the zhenqi into a compact stream of sword intent to protect oneself. Nevertheless, having cultivated the Heaven's Path divine art and possessing the Eye of Insight, this was not much trouble for Zhongxian. 2 hours later, he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air before getting to his feet once more. After an arduous training session, he had finally brought his mastery of the flowing water swordsmanship up to the level of major accomplishment. I can't test out the prowess of the flowing water swordsmanship here, but I reckon even Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle experts will be unable to breach my defenses now. In fact, even Saint Seven Dan experts will have to struggle a fair bit before they can lay a finger on me. Zhongxian thought in agitation. What he was lacking the most at the moment happened to be a good defensive technique. This had been displayed very clearly to him when he was sent flying with a single punch from his future brother-in-law. However, with this sword art, even if he was still no match for Luo Shenqing, at the very least, he would not be incapacitated in a single punch anymore. Furthermore, The defensive ability of the flowing water swordsmanship would only grow stronger as his cultivation rose, possibly making it one of his stronger trump cards at the moment. Chapter 1328. It's time to show some real skills. Sensing the might that he could exert through his sword intent, Zhongxian was deeply pleased. After immersing himself in his glee for a moment, he sat back down on the floor and crossed his leg to cultivate the first sword art of the 3 swords of Lingshu, sea-severing sword. This sword art required the simultaneous cooperation of 108 swords, but fortunately, he had managed to make a decent number of Saint Intermediate tier swords submit to him back at the Sword Lagoon, so that was not an issue. He imaged the movements of every single sword and sword art in his head, examining each of them in detail and refining all of them to the sharpest precision. 2 hours later, he got up to his feet once more. After a long session of arduous work, he had successfully mastered the sea-severing sword. Of course, as he had mastered the 2 sword arts through imagery, he had not gotten an opportunity to see them in action yet. As such, he could only fathom a guess about their true might. With my mastery of the sea-severing sword, even without using the Lingshu sword and the others, I would still be able to drown a Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage Cultivator with my sword chi. If I use my full strength, slaying even a Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle Expert could be possible, Zhongxian thought with eyes gleaming in excitement. As expected of an offensive sword quintessence, its might was truly frightening. Even without wielding a weapon, he could defeat a Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage Cultivator with ease. If he utilized all his means, even a Saint 7 Dan Primary Stage Cultivator could possibly fall under his offense. With such fighting prowess, he would at least be capable of protecting himself in the expert-filled sanctum of sages now. After cultivating the 2 top-notch sword arts, Zhongxian exhaled a mouthful of turbid gas as his heart shuddered in excitement. With his current fighting prowess, he was confident that he would be able to clear the Jiao corridor with ease. All right, I should be done here. I should leave now. Seeing that it was getting late, Zhongxian got to his feet and walked out of the room. As soon as he stepped out, he saw that Zhen Qinsheng was still standing at the very center of the room, and Shui Qianrou, Senior Xie, and the others were seated on the ground in kneeling positions. They were staring intently at the sword character on the wall with creases on their foreheads, seemingly deep in thought. "Zhongshe, you're out," Zhen Qinsheng remarked with a smile. Despite only being a freshman, the young man had achieved the level of sword quintessence. In Zhen Qinsheng's heart, the young man could already be considered his peer. As such, he did not take the tone that he would usually speak to his juniors with. "What are they doing?" Zhongxian pointed to Shui Qianrou and the others in confusion. "Ah. They saw how you managed to comprehend sword quintessence just by studying the sword character for a short moment, and that has ignited their drive. So, they decided to sit here to study the sword character as well in the hope that they will be able to take the final step forward and achieve the level of sword quintessence, just as you did," Zhen Qinsheng replied with a hint of satisfaction to his voice. It was not like he had never encouraged his students to study the sword character in the past, but they had never heeded his advice before. In their view, there was simply nothing interesting about the sword character to study. However, after witnessing what Zhongxian had achieved, they were now all more driven than ever to succeed. "I have ignited their drive." Zhongxian widened his eyes in astonishment. The reason he had been able to achieve a breakthrough so swiftly was because he had successfully compiled a Heaven's Path technique from the insights carved beneath the sword character. To expect to achieve a breakthrough just by staring at a mere character. Weren't they daydreaming? However, since they were Zhen Qinsheng's students, it would be rude for an outsider like him to interfere too much in their affairs. Thus, he could only suppress his overwhelming urge to bellow at them and plaster on a smile. "Well, all the best then." Unaware of the thoughts in Zhongxian's mind, Zhen Qinsheng simply chuckled softly before asking, "Did you receive any insights from the books in the Compendium of Sword Arts?" "Thank you for granting me access to your collection of books, Elder Zhen. I have benefited greatly from it." Zhongxian bowed deeply. If not for those books, he would not have been able to learn the flowing water swordsmanship and cultivate it to the level of a Heaven's Path technique. He would not have been able to master the first sword art of the 3 swords of Lingshu either and, through doing so, induce an immense surge in his fighting prowess. Oh! Hearing Zhong Xian's words, Zhen Qinsheng's eyes lit up. Since that's the case, would you like to trade some blows with me? It would be a delight to see the swordsmanship of the only sword practitioner in history to have comprehended two different types of sword quintessence. It would be an honor to receive Elder Zhen's guidance. He had just mastered those two sword arts, and he was seeking an opportunity to try out its strength. Considering that the person standing before him was one of the rare sword masters in the master-teacher continent, there was definitely no one better for him to practice his skills on. Stroking his beard, Zhen Qinsheng said with a smile, "Good. Let's not disrupt their cultivation and head to another location." Yuan Zhongxian nodded. While Zhongxian thought that it was impossible for Shui Qianrou and the others to grasp sword quintessence just by staring at the character, it would still be highly beneficial in helping them advance their comprehension of swordsmanship. Since it was not anything bad, there was no reason for Zhongxian to pour a pail of cold water over their fiery drive. Following behind Zhen Qinsheng, they soon arrived in a room. It seemed to be a specialized training room, and the walls were reinforced with fortification formations. The formations were all at grade 8, and even with Zhongxian's current strength, he would still have trouble trying to break them open. "Let's do it here." Zhen Qinsheng gestured with a smile as he walked to the center of the room. Flicking his forefinger, a surge of sword qi shot forth from his fingertips. Upon seeing Zhen Qinsheng's actions, Zhongxian was taken aback. "Elder Zhen, aren't you going to suppress your cultivation?" Zhen Qinsheng was at least a Saint 8 Dan expert, whereas he was only at Saint 5 Dan primary stage. The disparity between them was simply too great. How was he supposed to fight against Zhen Qinsheng if the latter did not suppress his cultivation? "If I were to suppress my cultivation, I fear that my old bones would not even survive a single blow from you," Zhen Qinsheng replied with a bitter smile. The sight of the young man before him crushing his disciple with ease was still fresh in his mind. He did not think that he would stand much of a chance if he suppressed his cultivation down to the same level as the other party. After all, the young man's comprehension of swordsmanship and combat had reached a level that was inconceivable even to him. He had encountered many geniuses in his years in the Sanctum of Sages, but only the little princess of the Luo clan and 2 or 3 others could leave him with such a feeling of apprehension. "But," Zhongxian frowned, "there's no way I will stand a chance against you in your current state." He was well aware of the limitations of his strength. The old man before him was not just any ordinary Saint 8 Dan expert, he was also a swordmaster. Given the vast disparity in their cultivation, Zhongxian would only be crushed in the battle. "Why don't we do this instead? I won't suppress my cultivation, but I'll use only 1% of my full strength. That will roughly be equivalent to the might a Saint 7 Dan primary stage cultivator possesses. Don't worry, I won't allow you to be injured. At the same time, through such an arrangement, you can let loose without worrying about injuring me. This way, you will be able to better test your strength," Zhen Qinsheng said with a smile. "All right then." Hearing those words, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. For some inexplicable reason, his heart started beating in excitement. So far, he had not had a chance to clash with a Saint 8 Dan expert. If he could test himself against Zhen Qinsheng's strength, he would be more prepared when he faced opponents of that caliber in the future. "I'll be making my move then." With a flick of his hand, a sword appeared in Zhongxian's hand, and a brilliant cold glint flashed across the room, emanating a chilling intent. The Lingshu sword. He had never wielded it ever since obtaining it. It was simply too strong. He feared that he would accidentally decimate his opponent with it. But since Zhen Qinsheng was coming at him without suppressing his cultivation, that would not be a problem. Hong Long. With a swift slash, boundless sword qi barraged forth with astounding might, and for an instant, it felt as if space was crushing in on one. "Is that a Saint high-tier artifact?" Zhen Qinsheng's mouth twitched, and his eyes narrowed in astonishment. Saint high-tier artifacts were rare even in the Sanctum of Sages. Considering that the young man was only an unaffiliated cultivator, it was a little hard to believe that he would have such a weapon with him. In terms of pure strength, Saint high-tier artifacts harnessed might surpassing that of Saint 7 Dan cultivators. If a sword master like the young man were to wield it against him. Cough cough. "It won't be good for you to rely too much on the strength of your sword. Here, why don't I lend you a spare one for the duel? With a reddened face, Jen Qinsheng handed a sword over. That will do as well. Thinking about it once more, the might of the Lingshu sword was indeed too great, and it would be unfair to use it in a friendly duel. Thus, Zhongxian nodded and took the sword that was passed to him. With just a few taps of his fingers on the blade, a resounding buzz echoed, and the sword acknowledged Zhongxian as its master. Seeing how swiftly Zhongxian managed to make the sword submit to him, Jen Qinsheng's lips twitched. As expected of a genius who had comprehended two different sword quintessences, even his ability to tame swords was far more effective than that of ordinary sword practitioners. It's a Saint intermediate tier weapon, Zhongxian noted as he felt the sword in his hand. At this point, he suddenly recalled another matter, and he turned his gaze to Jen Qinsheng once more. Right, Elder Jen. In this duel, it will be fine for me to do anything as long as I don't wield a weapon exceeding Saint intermediate tier, right? That's right. Jen Qinsheng nodded. You are able to easily drive Saint intermediate tier artifact easily with your current strength, but you are still too weak to regulate the might of a Saint high tier artifact. Even if you win the duel with it, it will be pointless if you aren't the one in control. Even the most ordinary Saint high tier artifacts wielded a fighting prowess on par with Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle cultivators. Considering how the young man only possessed a cultivation of leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, he would be led astray by the Saint high tier sword he had. Eventually, the one who was in control would not be him but his sword. That's good. Hearing that he could do whatever he wanted as long as the weapon he wielded was no more than Saint intermediate tier, Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. He had not yet executed the sea-severing sword after mastering it. This would be a good chance for him to try it out. In any case, the opponent he was facing was far stronger than him, so there was no need to worry about accidentally hurting him at all. With a jot of the sword in his hand, a cold glint flashed across the air, and an imposing tide of sword chi immediately burst forth, slashing through whatever stood in its path. Not bad. Seeing Zhongxian's move, Jen Qinsheng chuckled softly. By weaving his fingers across the air, it took only an instant before a current of sword chi flowed right in front of him, reminiscent of a massive barrier. Flowing water swordsmanship. Just as Jen Qinsheng had promised, he had only used 1/100th of his strength in his defense. Nevertheless, the strength he wielded was not to be underestimated. The sword chi flowing within the massive barrier was extremely compact, leaving not even the slightest space for anything to bypass it. It was reminiscent of an immense, unbreachable dominion. Ding 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 ding, the barrage of sword chi that Zhongxian had sent forth collided with the flowing wall of sword chi, inducing innumerable ripples on it. Under the violent attacks, the formation in the room shook intensely, and glaring scars appeared on the ground. The formations inscribed into the room were extremely resilient, but Zhongxian's full strength paired with the frightening might of the sea-severing sword was so powerful that even the formations seemed as if they would collapse at any moment. His indeed formidable. Even though Jen Qinsheng had managed to keep Zhongxian's attack at bay for the moment, he could clearly sense that the might from the tide of sword chi was swiftly growing stronger by the moment, and his expression turned grave. As expected of a genius who commanded two different sword quintessences. His strength was truly extraordinary. On the other hand, Zhongxian felt so excited that he could leap in joy. Even when using his full strength, he was unable to deal even the slightest harm to the Saint 8 Dan Swordmaster. Since that was the case, it seemed like it was time for him to show his true skills. Chapter 1329 The Stifled Jen Qinsheng. Let me try out the real sea-severing sword then. With eyes gleaming with excitement, Zhongxian grabbed at the surrounding air forcefully. What he had executed earlier was only the sword intent of the three swords of Lingshu. He didn't really go all out. However, seeing how Jen Qinsheng had managed to deal with his first attack with such ease, the final shred of hesitation within him finally vanished. Pilipala. A series of resounding cracking sounds echoed as more than 100 Saint intermediate tier weapons floating in the air shot forth. Go! Lines of insight rippled in Zhongxian's eyes as he adept maneuvered an extremely complicated sword art toward Jen Qinsheng. The sea-severing sword might only be a single sword art, but it was also a massive sword formation made up of 108 swords. Every single sword would be executing a sword art of its own, and collectively, it was as if an entire army was charging at one. Boom! The barrage of swords swiftly turned into an imposing wave collapsing down upon the room, and countless intersecting sword chi permeated the room. This is the old sword maestro's secret art? But Jian Qinsheng, whose tension had just alleviated slightly after successfully fending off the first attack, suddenly saw the formation of swords before him, and he nearly fainted on the spot. The old sword maestro was a renowned swordmaster in history, so he had heard of his name and secret art before. In fact, when he was traveling around the world, in seek of inspiration to further his swordsmanship, he had paid the Sword Lagoon a visit and trained there for quite a while, but due to the clashes in ideology, he eventually gave up on the notion. He thought that the old sword maestro's heritage should have already died out by now, but who could have thought that he would see it from the young man before him? Furthermore, it seemed to be sharper, swifter, and stronger than what he had heard in the legends. And more importantly, he had just thought that the other party had no suitable weapon and gave him a Saint Intermediate tier sword, but in the blink of an eye, he suddenly whipped out this entire bunch. If you have so many swords with you, why in the world did you accept my Saint Intermediate tier sword? Jian Qinsheng's face twitched uncontrollably. However, in this moment, he had to devote his all into fending against the attack that was diving right at him. Thus, he opened up his both hands and skillfully weaved another barrier of flowing sword chi, just that it was clearly much more fortified this time around. Boom! Barely after he was done, the assault of the 100 swords arrived right before him. With overwhelming force, they collided on the barrier. Catcher! Catcher! Amidst a series of crisp echoes, the barrier of flowing sword chi began shattering like a broken mirror. How could those sword chi know the flaws of my flowing water swordsmanship? Jian Qinsheng's body jolted. The flowing water swordsmanship was extremely difficult to overcome due to its ability to spread out any force falling upon it over its entire area, but the young man was still able to shatter it in an instant. This could only mean to say that the latter had found the openings within his flowing water swordsmanship, making it impossible for him to sustain its flowing state. One must know that even someone as strong as that man from the Zhong clan was unable to accomplish such a feat, so how did the young man before him manage to do it? Shocked by the situation before him, Jian Qinsheng swiftly moved to repair the barrier of flowing sword chi, but he realized that it was already too late. The 100 swords had already slipped through the openings in his defenses, and they were surging swiftly toward him from all directions with devastating forces reminiscent of a storm. Before he could do anything, the swords had already pierced into him. Pu. A sweet sensation welled up in Jian Qinsheng's throat as he was sent flying. Peng. He was slammed into the wall. Hulala. The fortification formations reinforcing the room also creaked loudly under the overwhelming impact, seemingly ready to break apart at any moment. Hu. Jian Qinsheng was already plastered on the wall, but Zhong Xian's attack wasn't over yet. The 100 swords overlapped with one another and launched attacks one after another, reminiscent of the relentless waves of the sea, each more powerful and imposing than the previous. In a moment, Jian Qinsheng's body was surrounded by the silhouettes of countless swords, and the cold glint reflected from them made it difficult for one to see what was ahead. Boom! Unable to withstand it any longer, the fortification formation finally burst apart, and the room swiftly collapsed under the immense force. Rock fragments ricocheted around the room amidst a rain of dust. But even at this moment, the offense of the swords still showed no signs of halting. Jian Qinsheng attempted to flee to regain his momentum, but the swords were ingeniously aimed at the openings of every single he made, such that even fending against them already took up all of his strength and attention. Boom. Forced back by the barrage of the swords, Jian Qinsheng eventually knocked down 7 to 8 rooms before everything finally came to a halt. Exhaling deeply, Zhong Xian retracted his palm. His face had turned pale at some point in time, and his body was aching from head to toe. He couldn't even find the strength within him to lift his fingers. When he had practiced the sea-severing sword earlier in the Compendium of Sword Arts, he did so through mental imagery to sharpen his form, so it wasn't possible for him to get a clear idea of how powerful it would be. It was only after executing it did he realize how frightening the sword art actually was. In fact, in the midst of the execution, he found that he had lost all control over the sword art, and every last bit of zhenqi was squeezed out of his body before the sword art finally came to a halt. This is too scary, losing control of my body. I better not use this sword art unless in times of emergency. Cold sweat rained down Zhongxian's head as he patted his heart fearfully. It was not to say that there was something wrong with the sea-severing sword, but that his cultivation was simply too low, making it impossible to him to wield full control over the sword art. This was similar to how a child could swing a hammer too, but the child's lack of strength would make it difficult for him to control it, especially when the hammer was in motion. In this moment, Zhongxian was the child swinging the hammer. Once the sea-severing sword was executed, he couldn't stop until every last drop of zhenqi in his body was sapped dry. Ever since he had undergone the Saint Ascension ordeal and reached Saint Realm, he had never depleted his zhenqi before. Yet, the sea-severing sword was actually able to drain every last bit of energy within him, which went to show just how powerful the sword art was. However, it was also extremely dangerous for a cultivator to use up all of his zhenqi in the midst of a battle. It would mean that he was powerless against anything that his opponent would throw at him next. Right, is Jian Qinsheng all right? Too engrossed in himself, Zhongxian forgot about the plight Jian Qinsheng was in. Looking at the rubble all over the ground, he couldn't help but feel a little worried. Even though Jian Qinsheng said that he wouldn't lower his cultivation, he still suppressed his strength to 1/100th of his original might. There was no saying that the other party might just succumb to his sword art in his weakened state, and that would mean that he was a murderer. Who? Fortunately, a silhouette suddenly rose from the rubble at this moment, Jian Qinsheng. He wasn't able to maintain his image as an expert anymore. His clothes were in tatters, and his body was cloaked in dust. His wretched state felt as if someone had just taken advantage of him. Elder Jian. Zhongxian's lips twitched for a moment before he called out worriedly. I'm 5pu. Jian Qinsheng chuckled awkwardly, but before he could finish his words, another mouthful of fresh blood spurted from his mouth. Putong. Jian Qinsheng plummeted from the sky and fell headfirst into a pile of mud. At this very moment, he was suffering from a mental breakdown. Under normal circumstances, given his strength, it was impossible for the young man who hurt him no matter how powerful his sword art may be. However, he had suppressed his strength down to 1/100th of it, and his flowing water swordsmanship was breached so quickly that he hardly had any time to react. To be honest, he was extremely lucky to be alive at this very moment. Lying in the pile of mud, Jian Qinsheng swallowed a pill, and it took a long while before strength slowly returned back to him. Getting back to his feet, he took a look at his surroundings and sighed deeply. He was curious to see how powerful a person who had comprehended two sword quintessences would be, only to end up being reduced to such a state in a single move. It was fortunate that no one was around to see it, or else he might have just died from embarrassment. Teacher, are you fine? Old master, what happened? Everyone, be on your guards. Don't let the culprit get away, and just like that, Jian Qinsheng's final bit of consolation was utterly shattered. Turning around, he saw his butlers, guards, Shui Qianro, Senior Xie, and his other disciples all standing not too far away, looking at him in worry. What are you all doing here? If not for Jian Qinsheng's mental fortitude, he might have just passed out on the spot. He was still feeling thankful that no one saw him earlier when more than 100 people suddenly materialized behind his back. That was almost everyone in the residence. Teacher, Zhongsha said that you were injured and he asked us to hurry over to take a look. Senior Xie was worried that something bad might have happened, so he called all of us to follow him. Shui Qianro quickly explained. Jian Qinsheng clutched his chest, clawing at his heart which was aching so much that he could hardly breathe. It was one thing for the young man to reduce him to the pitiful state he was currently in, but to even call his disciples and servants here to spectate his misery. This was too much. Don't worry, I'm not injured. I just accidentally used too much force when I was practicing my swordsmanship earlier. With a reddened face, Jian Qinsheng shrugged the matter off casually with a wave of his hand. Not injured. Senior Xie, Shui Qianro, and the others looked at one another with rather complicated looks in their eyes. Completely tattered clothes and a swollen face. Is it really possible for anyone to be reduced to such a state from practicing his swordsmanship? Cough cough. Where's Zhongshe? Knowing that his students were thinking, Jian Qinsheng coughed loudly twice and changed the topic. He still saw the young man when he flew up earlier, so why would the latter be nowhere to be seen at this moment? Zhongshe has asked me to relay his gratitude toward you for allowing him to browse through your collection of books. It has provided him with some inspiration regarding his swordsmanship, so he bade his farewell to return back to his residence to cultivate. Shui Qianrou said. He returned back to his residence to cultivate. Jian Qinsheng felt even more stifled inside after hearing those words. After causing a mess around here and severely injuring him, that young man actually secretly fled the scene. Gratitude, you said? Is this how you show your gratitude? Just as Jian Qinsheng was contemplating whether he should capture that young man back here to teach him a lesson, Shui Qianrou suddenly walked up and presented him with a book. Right, teacher. Before he left, Zhongshe instructed me to hand this over to you personally. Jian Qinsheng took the book with a deep frown and casually flipped it open. With just a single glance, his entire body froze on the spot, and disbelief plastered itself on his face. This. Jian Qinsheng trembled uncontrollably. Considering how the ink on the book had barely dried, it was clear that it was just written down a moment ago. Detailed on it was the various mistakes he had made on his cultivation, as well as the aspects which he had erred in his comprehension of swordsmanship. In fact, a large handful of those points written down were questions which had left him deeply confused for many years. In other words, as long as he were to make corrections according to what was written on the book, he would definitely be able to bring his fighting prowess up to greater heights. It was just a brief encounter, and I hardly made any move at all. But he was still able to see through so much about me. Despite squeezing the book tightly in his hand, Jian Qinsheng still felt as if he was in a dream. On top of being a sword master, he was a teacher in the sanctum of sages as well. It wasn't rare for him to have to analyze the problems that a student was facing in his cultivation or swordsmanship and offer him pointers to resolve them. Naturally, his eye of discernment was extremely formidable as well, far surpassing that of his peers. Even so, he was still completely helpless toward the problem he was facing. Yet, the young man was able to uncover and concisely detail all of the problems he was facing, and more importantly, he had even provided solutions to them as well. Just what kind of monstrous eye of discernment did that young man possess? It's no wonder why he was able to comprehend two different types of sword quintessences at his young age. In terms of comprehension of swordsmanship, I don't even come close to holding a candle against him. In this moment, Jian Qinsheng finally understood why the young man was able to earn the recognition of his ancestors' sword intent so quickly. From the very start, they weren't even at the same level as one another. Perhaps, that's what a true prodigy is, Jian Qinsheng remarked deeply as he closed the book and kept it into his storage. Then, a thought suddenly came to his mind, and his eyes lit up. Wait a moment. Given that young man's deep understanding of swordsmanship, if I were to bring him to the Zhong clan, perhaps I might be able to exact vengeance for the grudge back then. Chapter 1330 Let everything collapse. 1. It took 6 hours of rest, till the sun was starting to rise over the eastern horizon, before Zhongxian finally felt his zhenqi fully recovering, and his mind, spirit, and soul once again returned to their peak. He instinctively knew that it would be a bad idea to remain there after injuring Jian Qinsheng, so he decisively collected all of his swords and returned to his residence. As expected of an offense-based sword quintessence, its might is really not to be underestimated. Recalling the battle that had happened the previous night, Zhongxian's eyes gleamed in excitement. Even though Jian Qinsheng had suppressed his strength to 1/100th of his original might, his fighting prowess was still not something that any ordinary Saint 7 Dan primary stage cultivators would have been able to compete with. Since that was the case, wouldn't the fact that he had been able to send the other party flying mean that no Saint 7 Dan primary stage expert would be a match for him once he went all out? Saint 7 Dan phantasmal space realm at that level, a cultivator would be able to grasp the very essence of space. Their dominion would begin to morph into a form in between a phantasm and reality, making it extremely difficult to deal with. The dominions created by Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion realm experts would manifest in a physical form, such as an area of mist or a barrier of light, thus making it discernible to the eye. However, upon reaching Saint 7 Dan phantasmal space realm, one's dominion would become intangible, similar to one's spiritual perception. Invisible to the eyes, untouchable to the hands, its discreteness could create unimaginable effects. For example, back when Luo Shenqing kicked Elder Su Bing flying, the reason the latter did not dodge was because Luo Shenqing had already shrouded the latter in his dominion, trapping the latter firmly in place. With his Saint 5 Dan primary stage cultivation, it should have been impossible for Zhong Xian to phase an expert of that caliber. However, with the sea-severing sword, this impossibility had become a real possibility. It's daybreak. I should head over to the Jiao corridor and finish it. The rising crimson sun had forced the dark night to retreat, bringing light back to the world. Zhong Xian began making his way over to the Hall of Solidarity once more. He soon arrived at the front counter, and Qing Yu was still seated there. I wish to challenge the Jiao corridor once more. Accustomed to the procedure, Zhong Xian wasted no time and passed the concentrated high-tier spirit stones over straight away. After all he had done, reading, learning swordsmanship, and recovering from his exertion, a day had already passed. Thus, he could continue challenging the corridor of puppets once more. Seeing that it was Zhong Xian, Qing Yu passed a challenge token over with a nod. Upon receiving the token, Zhong Xian immediately turned around and left. He wasn't able to clear the Jiao corridor yesterday, but he rushed over as soon as the sun was up. The male attendant from before was also around, and he could not help asking, within this short period of time, there shouldn't have been any substantial change in his strength, right? So, what is he in such a hurry for? Cultivation was a process of consistent effort, not a way to achieve great things in a heartbeat. How could one night of cultivation possibly help him? If the young man wanted to clear the Jiao corridor, he would require a few months of hard work at the very least. I'm not too sure either. Qing Yu shook her head. Perhaps, he might have successfully cultivated some kind of secret art and wants to give it a try, but the stronger a secret art is, the harder it is to grasp it. The male attendant shook his head. There are some who devote their lives to studying a secret art, only to gain a superficial grasp of it. How much could he possibly have learned in a single night? It was not that he had no trust in Zhong Xian's strength, but some things were simply impossible. The Jiao corridor was the hardest corridor to clear, and even most Grand Dominion realm advanced stage cultivators would have trouble defeating the puppet within. Even if Zhong Xian had managed to clear the Yi corridor the previous day, it still did not seem possible for him to clear the Jiao corridor after one day of hard work. The previous one to challenge the Jiao corridor was the Luo clan's little princess, right? I seem to recall that she's the current record holder, the male attendant suddenly remarked. She's indeed the current record holder. She cleared the Jiao corridor within just 3 minutes. Upon speaking of the Luo clan's little princess, admiration and respect immediately seeped into Qing Yu's eyes. While other challengers struggled with all their might but were still unable to clear the Jiao corridor, the little princess was able to clear it within a short 3 minutes. More importantly, when she left the room, there was not the slightest speck of dust on her, maintaining her ever-elegant and poised appearance. Every time she recalled this matter, she could not help but tremble in excitement. Ever since the corridor of puppets was created, there was not a single person who had achieved such a record in the Jiao corridor. In other words, the accomplishment of the Luo clan's little princess was unrivaled. There was no one who could compete with her even in the past tens of thousands of years, and it was unlikely that anyone would be able to break her record anytime soon. Indeed, she's really too formidable. The male attendant nodded in agreement. He was just about to speak when ripples suddenly appeared in the tea placed in front of him. Following which, the cup began trembling, followed by the table. What's going on? The both of them sprang right up to their feet, and they began scanning their surroundings warily. I have no idea. Halfway through Qing Yu's words, she suddenly felt the ground shaking intensely, as if there was an earthquake. After which, a resounding explosion rumbled from the distance. That seems to be, from the Jiao corridor? The eyebrows of the duo shot up as they hurriedly rushed in the direction that the explosion came from. Before they could arrive at the Jiao corridor, they saw a young man walking over with an apologetic look on his face. My apologies, I failed to rein in my strength when making a move earlier. Qing Yu glanced at the Jiao corridor, or to be more exact, the rubble that was once the Geo corridor. Smoke was pouring out of it. Sweeping through the contents with her spiritual perception, she saw that the puppet of the Geo corridor had already been dismantled into countless pieces, such that there was not even an intact spare part anymore. It truly was complete and utter destruction. You. Unable to hold herself back anymore, Qingyu asked Zhongxian in agitation, "Just what did you do?" She was well aware of the strength that the puppet in the Geo corridor wielded. Even ordinary Grand Dominion Realm advanced stage experts would not be a match for it, and yet, that fellow still managed to crush it so easily. Just how in the world did he manage to do it? More importantly, it had not even been 3 minutes since he had taken the challenge token from her. Within this period, he had actually defeated the puppet and torn down the entire Geo corridor while he was at it. "I was only using a sword art," Zhongxian said awkwardly. Due to the rules of the Geo corridor, Zhongxian was unable to wield his swords, so he could only use his sword qi in substitution. Nevertheless, the might of the sea-severing sword was still far beyond his control. The puppet was reduced to dust as soon as it appeared, but even so, he was still unable to stop the sword art until it depleted a massive portion of his junchi. The current destruction was the result of that. He had thought that since the Corridor of Puppets was a formal trial by the Sanctum of Sages, the fortification formations reinforcing the corridors would be rather powerful, so it should have been fine for him to let loose. It was never his intention to cause such a huge commotion. It was fortunate that the trial had deemed it a success right after the puppet was destroyed, and the books at the very end of the corridor had come into his sight, allowing him to swiftly collect them into his library of Heaven's Path. Otherwise, if his efforts had ended in vain after all the trouble he had been through, he really might have burst into tears on the spot. Sword art. Qingyu and the male receptionist were really at a loss of words. Sword arts, they had seen plenty of those. But one that could destroy not only the puppet but the entire corridor along with it. They had never seen one that wielded such might before. "Wait right here for a moment. I'll report this matter to the elder," Qingyu told Zhongxian before hurriedly leaving. The destruction of the Geo corridor was a huge matter, far beyond the jurisdiction of a mere receptionist like her. The Hall of Solidarity could be considered property of the Sanctum of Sages. If everyone were to destroy it without care, not even the Sanctum of Sages would have enough money to pay for the reparations. All right. Knowing that it was only right for him to make compensation after causing destruction, Zhongxian had no intention of leaving either. He found a place to sit down and began meditating to recover his junchi. While the strength of the sea-severing sword was reduced because he had not wielded any swords, the execution of the sword art still depleted nearly half of his junchi. Previously, I thought that the old sword maestro was just unable to gather sufficient swords for the execution of the technique, but from the looks of it now, even if he had gathered sufficient swords, it is uncertain whether he would have been able to execute it or not. As one who had cultivated the Saint Ascension Decipher, the capacity of Zhongxian's junchi far exceeded that of other cultivators, but even so, he was still nearly unable to keep up with the depletion of energy. Despite being the creator of the move, the old sword maestro probably still had a fair bit of trouble trying to execute the technique. Knowing that it would be impossible for him to fully recover without several hours of cultivation, Zhongxian decided to immerse his consciousness into his library of Heaven's Path to take a look at the books that he had just collected. There were only 5 books in the Geo corridor, and they corresponded to the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The tier of the books was extremely high, plausibly the most profound and powerful leaving aperture realm cultivation techniques in the Sanctum of Sages. Putting all the leaving aperture realm cultivation techniques together, Zhongxian commanded, "Compile." Voila! A new book materialized. Flipping it open, Zhongxian's eyes lit up in delight. After all his hard work, he had finally succeeded in compiling the leaving aperture realm Heaven's Path divine art. Just thinking about the difficulties that he had been through was enough to make tears stream down his cheeks. I wonder if Sun Qiong has managed to find a source to procure pinnacle spirit stones, Zhongxian wondered as he swiftly memorized the cultivation technique. Without a source of sufficiently pure spiritual energy, he would not be able to further his cultivation. Above concentrated high-tier spirit stones were the pinnacle spirit stones, which boasted extraordinary purity. If he could find a source for those, His quandary concerning a lack of spirit stones would be resolved. There were no pinnacle spirit stones in the Qingyuan Empire, but it should not be too difficult to find them in the Sanctum of Sages. He's the person who destroyed the Jiao corridor, Zhongshe. While Zhongxian was still in thought, he suddenly heard a voice. Raising his head, he saw Qing Yu leading an elder over. The elder took a look at the Jiao corridor, and his eyebrows immediately began twitching. Zhongxian hurriedly got up. Zhongshe, Elder Liao over here is in charge of everything concerning the leaving aperture realm corridor of puppets, Qing Yu introduced. Paying respects to Elder Liao, Zhongxian quickly clasped his fist. There was nothing else he could do. Under the roof of another, he had no choice but to lower his head. He still could not bring himself to be as domineering as his future brother-in-law. With a voice of suppressed rage, Elder Liao asked, "You said that you managed to reduce this place to this state just by executing a sword art?" "That's right." Zhongxian nodded hesitantly. "Pass me your challenge token." Zhongxian did as he was told. Elder Liao took a close look at the challenge token that Zhongxian had passed over, and a moment later, a deep frown appeared on his forehead. The Jiao corridor did not just have a formidable puppet, it had a powerful formation as well. Under normal circumstances, even a Grand Dominion Realm Pinnacle expert would not have the strength to cause such devastation in this place, unless the individual had cheated. But on the challenge token, the young man was reported to have cleared the trial fair and square. In other words, no acts of cheating had been detected by the system. Was it really possible for a leaving aperture realm primary stage cultivator to cause such destruction with his sword art? Perplexed, Elder Liao instructed, "What sword art did you execute earlier? Show it to me." "Show it to you? This?" A conflicted look surfaced on Zhongxian's face. "To be honest with you, my grasp over the sword art is still lacking, so I am unable to control it properly. I fear that I will accidentally harm you if I execute it here." "Harm me?" Elder Liao sneered. "While I am only a managerial elder here, my cultivation has at least reached Saint 7 Dan Phantasmal Space Realm. A leaving aperture realm primary stage cultivator like you actually fears that you will accidentally harm me? What arrogant word." There were various tiers to the elders of the Sanctum of Sages. Personnel who had reached Saint 7 Dan would be eligible to take on the role of a managerial elder, such as Su Bing and Elder Liao. "This. Elder Liao, even if you are confident in your strength, I still fear that my sword qi will destroy the other buildings in the area too." Zhongxian was still a little hesitant about executing the sea-severing sword here. "Do you think that your sword qi will have a chance to escape from my dominion? You must be joking." Elder Liao harumphed coldly with deep confidence reflected in his eyes. Chapter 1331 Let Everything Collapse 2. As a Saint 7 Dan phantasmal space expert, Elder Liao wielded incredible control over the space around him. If he couldn't even suppress the sword qi suppressed by a mere leaving aperture realm fellow, he would really be a failure of a cultivator. If you are really that confident, I guess it should be fine. Be careful then. Since Elder Liao was confident about the matter, Zhongxian decided not to say anything more. With a tap of his finger, surges of sword qi flew forth from his fingers, but instead of flying toward Elder Liao, they floated in the air as if they were blades of swords. So many of them. Elder Liao was slightly surprised to see the young man's ability to manipulate so many sword qi adept simultaneously. He quickly drew a semicircle before his chest and formed a protective barrier. He wanted to try for himself whether the other party's sword qi really wielded the strength to destroy the Jiao corridor. Woo-woo. Barely after he was done with that, a hurried buzzing sound suddenly echoed in the air, and as if the space before him had collapsed, more than 100 surges of sword qi arrived within a 5 meters radius of him in the blink of an eye. So fast. Horrified by how quick the young man's sword qi was, Elder Liao hurriedly activated his dominion to stop the latter. Boom boom boom. The sword qi collided with Elder Liao's dominion and produced a sound reminiscent of a mixer being plunged into a water vat. The violent impacts caused his face to redden, and his dominion nearly dissipated under the relentless barrage of attacks. Su. Under the overwhelming pressure pushing against his dominion, Elder Liao was slammed heavily into the wall behind him, bashing a huge hole through it. Even so, The might of the sword qi pressing against his dominion didn't seem to show any sign of weakening. At the same time, more and more sword qi were surging forth toward him as well, causing the entire area to be flooded with cold glints. In an instant, the entire main hall was permeated with sword qi. Jiyaya. Under the relentless barrage of sword qi within and Elder Liao crashing around the place, the main hall finally reached the limits of its durability. A glaring crack swiftly crept its way across the walls, and with a resounding explosion, the entire room collapsed inward. Sometime later, Zhongxian finally came to a halt after expending every last drop of his zhenqi, and he panted heavily on the spot. When he finally caught his breath and regained some strength, he took a look at his surroundings, and his eyebrows couldn't help but shoot up. In this very moment, the Jiao, Yi, Bing, Ding, Wu, Ji, Gang, Xin, Ren, and Gui, all 10 corridors had been reduced to rubble, and smoke was rising from their midst. In fact, even the main hall which was meant to receive challengers had been destroyed as well. Cough cough. A silhouette rose from the rubble. Elder Liao. His hair was half shaven off from the torrent of sword qi, and his body was inflicted with cuts all over. It was nearly impossible to use words to describe the sheer state of misery he was in. Zhongxian recoiled at the sight, and he swiftly chirped in anxiously, "Elder Liao, you were the one who told me to make a move. You declared confidently that you would be able to withstand my sword art, so what the heck is this then? Aren't you putting me in a spot? It wasn't easy for me to shake off my title as the god of destruction, and your overconfidence just set back all of the hard work I have put in all this while. With such a happening, how do you think others will see me? I just wanted to quietly clear the examination and read my books peacefully." Elder Liao's face flushed red as he looked at the collapsed corridors with a look of despair in his eyes. All he wanted to do was to check if the young man had been cheating. How did everything come to this? What left him even more frustrated was that he was the one who had insisted on the young man to make a move, so he couldn't blame the latter for this matter either. Get out of my sight. Elder Liao felt so frustrated that he thought he would explode on the spot. There were so many words he wanted to speak but couldn't, and eventually, he could only wave his hand with furiously gritted teeth. You are telling me to leave? Zhongxian was taken aback. I don't have to compensate for the corridor of puppets. While most of the responsibility for the destruction lay on Elder Liao, considering how huge this matter had blown up to, he didn't expect to be able to get out of this scot-free either. Are you able to pay for it? Elder Liao bellowed with a voice seething with anger. Zhongxian's lips twitched. I guess not. He didn't think that he was poor, but his fortune, in contrast to the powerful puppets and formations set up in Corridor of Puppets, was truly insignificant in comparison. There was no way he would have enough money to compensate for the damage. So, scram. Elder Liao bellowed. Yes. Zhongxian swiftly turned around to make his leave, but barely after taking a few steps, he suddenly turned around and said, Elder Liao, in the fight earlier, I found that your body is suffused with cold energy, so I advise you not to practice your Hyemal Yin formula anymore. How do you know that I practice the Hyemal Yin formula? This was the first time the both of them were meeting, so how could the other party know what cultivation technique he practiced? I heard of it from someone else. If, by any chance, you feel unwell, feel free to find me at my residence in the elite division. Zhongxian advised before decisively turning around and leaving. He had destroyed the corridor of puppets, but Elder Liao didn't forcefully keep him in the area or make things difficult for him. In a sense, he owed the other party a favor for this. In the battle they had earlier, he had compiled a book on the other party in the Library of Heaven's Path and noticed that there was a problem with the other party's cultivation technique, so he decided to advise him out of kind will. Actually, it wasn't a major issue either. As long as Elder Liao stopped cultivating the Hyemal Yin formula, the body should be able to recover by itself. Even if he didn't stop cultivating, as long as he sought treatment in time, the issue should be manageable. But considering how the other party was in the heat of his anger, it didn't seem like a good time to elaborate too much about it. After all, from experience, he knew that if he were to tell Elder Liao you are sick after destroying his place, there was a good chance that he would be pummeled to death on the spot. On the other hand, watching as the young man leave hurriedly after leaving behind those abrupt words, Elder Liao was baffled. However, when he saw the rubble all around him once more, rage began surging through his body once more. It seems like I shouldn't use the sea-severing sword easily in the future anymore. Glancing at the rubble behind him, Zhongxian shook his head in dejection. He had only executed this sword art thrice ever since mastering it, but he had already unintentionally harmed 2 people, destroyed a puppet, and devastated a crucial infrastructure of the Sanctum of Sages. Who knew what kind of mess he would get himself into if he were to continue using the sword art recklessly? It would be best for him to avoid using this sword art unless he was in a desperate situation, or else he might just be stealing his future brother-in-law's title as the King of Destruction. He was the man who was destined to become the Sanctum Head, a person revered and admired by countless. He mustn't end in a position where others would shun him, as if he was a hated troublemaker. I should go and check on how Sun Qiong is faring. Also, I need to find some means to earn more money. Even if Elder Liao didn't demand any payment from me, I should at least make some compensation for what I have done. Zhongxian thought. Had it been any other occasion, it wouldn't have been a big deal to him whether he could become the Sanctum Head or not. However, this matter had a profound effect on whether he would be able to stop Luo Ruoxin's marriage in the 3rd month of the next year or not. Without becoming the Sanctum Head of the Sanctum of Sages, it would be nigh impossible for him to vie with the Zhong clan's young prodigy for Luo Ruoxin's marriage in hand, so he was determined to obtain the position, by hook or by crook. According to what Sage Kuei had said, prior to unsealing the Sanctum Head token, it would be best for him to win as many people's respect as possible so that his prestige would be higher after his inauguration. But within just 2 days of his enrollment, he had already destroyed Jian Qinsheng's home and the corridor of puppets. No matter what, he should at least do something to salvage his crumbling reputation. But of course, the fact that he didn't have much money at hand still held, so it was about time to bolster his finances. Thus, Zhongxian quickly returned back to his residence, and not too long later, Sun Qiong returned as well. Perhaps it was due to an entire night of hard work, Sun Qiong appeared to be a little weary. How is it? Zhongxian turned his gaze over and asked. Young master, I have looked into the matter, and there is a wide range of items of cultivation resources available in the Sanctum of Sages. In terms of effectiveness, there's nothing that compares to pinnacle spirit stones, but it appears that those can only be sourced in the inner sanctum. Sun Qiong revealed his findings. Inner sanctum? Zhongxian frowned. He had heard that the Sanctum of Sages was divided into 2 main categories, inner sanctum and outer sanctum. Most likely, Luo Ruoxin was in the inner sanctum. That's right. Other than pinnacle spirit stones, I also found grade 8 energy repository pill. I had someone purchase some of those for me. Please take a look, Sun Qiong said as he passed a jade bottle over. Uncorking the jade bottle, Zhongxian took a look at the contents inside and nodded. There were 3 pills in total, and they were indeed rich in spiritual energy. The energy contained within them were significantly greater than the grade 7 spirit reinforcing pills he had a while back. It's indeed useful to me, but I'll need a lot more of it. At the very least, I would require at least 30 of them in order to push for a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm intermediate stage. Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in distress. While these energy repository pills were at grade 8, perhaps due to the limitations of the pill forging skills of the apothecary, they had only reached the level of formation. As such, the spiritual energy they harnessed was rather limited. Are there any other cultivation resources? Zhongxian asked. There are. It seems like it's possible to earn rewards through clearing missions in the Sanctum of Sages, and one of the rewards available is the Jade Spirit Essence. Sun Qiong said. Jade Spirit Essence. Zhongxian's eyes lit up. Just like spirit stones, Jade Spirit Essence would only be formed in areas that were rich in spiritual energy, so the spiritual energy it harnessed was extremely pure. While it couldn't compare up to pinnacle spirit stones, it was indeed a much better cultivation resource than concentrated high-tier spirit stones. The problem was that Jade Spirit Essences were extremely rare, rumored to be harder to find than pinnacle spirit stones. Even Zhongxian had only seen them in the books before. What missions are there? There is quite a huge variety of them. Missions can be requested by both students and teachers, but most of them would be rather difficult to complete. Based on what I have seen earlier, there are a total of 3 missions that have Jade Spirit Essence as their reward, and of them, one awards 3 Jade Spirit Essences. Sun Chong said. 3 Jade Spirit Essences? Zhong Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. Jade Spirit Essences were far larger than Spirit Stones, and a single one of it could be easily worth up to 10,000 concentrated high-tier Spirit Stones. The spiritual energy that was harnessed within 3 of those was definitely more than enough for him to successfully advance through the leaving aperture realm. If he were to sell them, even if it couldn't compensate the losses sustained by the corridor of puppets, it would at least help to supplement a substantial portion of the reparation cost. That's right. Sun Chong nodded. To offer such a hefty award, what's the mission? Even though Zhong Xian was excited by the notion of earning 3 Jade Spirit Essences, he knew that a mission that would offer such a reward would definitely be proportionately difficult as well. The Sanctum of Sages was filled with countless experts, but despite the handsome reward offered for the mission, there wasn't a single person who dared to take it up. That spoke a lot about the difficulty of the mission. It seems to be a mission from the Beast Tamer Hall. As for the details, I'm afraid that you would have to head there to learn more. Sun Chong said. Ultimately, he still wasn't a student of the Sanctum of Sages, so he didn't possess most of the privileges that all students have. In fact, it took him a lot of effort in order to gather this much information. Where are the missions posted? Bring me over to take a look. Zhong Xian was just about to have Sun Chong bring him over when a frown suddenly made its way to his forehead. Flicking his wrist, he took out his identity token and swiped his finger on it. A line of words came into appearance. Zhong Shu, come to the Hall of Attainment's Court of Elites immediately. We have to report in today. It was a message from Chen Liao. Report in. Right, I have to report in. Regardless of whether one was a student from the elite division or the ordinary division, they were to report in today in order to select or be assigned a teacher. Otherwise, without any backing in the Sanctum of Sages, it would be hard for the students to secure resources for themselves. Most of the master teachers in the Sanctum of Sages wouldn't go so far as to deprive a student of his allocated cultivation resources, but there was no guarantee that the others wouldn't do so. After all, the Sanctum of Sages took in not only master teachers but geniuses of other occupations as well. And most importantly, the reason why most geniuses chose to enroll in the Sanctum of Sages was to build up their own connection network. Disciples under the same teacher would inevitably be closer to one another, and it would be easier for them to ask favors from one another in the future too. Thus, choosing the correct teacher was of utmost importance. I want you to continue looking into the matter. I'll go report in first. Knowing that it would reflect badly on him if he were to be late on the very first day, Zhong Xian hurriedly made his way over to the Hall of Attainment. Attainment, solidarity, propriety, erudition, and integrity. The fact that attainment was placed first clearly reflected its position in the Sanctum of Sages. The most important responsibility of a master teacher was to impart their knowledge to the world, and the Hall of Attainment was the place where this happened. By the time Zhong Xian arrived, the entire area was already packed with people. Making just an estimate from what he could see, there were nearly 10,000 people in the area. Just like the Hall of Solidarity, there was a massive character written at the entrance to the Hall of Attainment as well. It seems like Kong Shi's handwritten characters can be found at the entrance of all 5 halls. Perhaps this is to remind the later generations to hold those values close to their hearts. Zhong Xian thought. Following which, he heard the sound of Vicious gulping down a mouthful of saliva. Zhong Xian callously sealed the fellow back into the Book of Heaven's path before proceeding in behind the crowd. The Hall of Attainment was divided into many sectors, and the classes for the Ordinary Division and Elite Division were located at different sectors. Students of the Elite Division had the privilege to choose their own teacher, whereas those of the Ordinary Division could only be selected by the teachers. Zhong Xian quickly scanned the area, and after finding the reporting location for the Elite Division, he swiftly walked over. As soon as he entered the room, he immediately saw the other 49 who had made it into the Elite Division together with him were all present. Chen Liao had been pacing around the room anxiously, and it was only when she saw Zhong Xian walking through the door did she finally heave a sigh of relief. She quickly walked over and said with a hushed voice, "Why are you only arriving now? Something big has happened. The mountain gate has collapsed. Chapter 1332 Self-Introduction. The mountain gate has collapsed. Zhong Xian was taken aback. Everything had been perfectly fine when they challenged the mountain gate examination the previous day. Everyone had displayed their capabilities as best they could in order to get into the top 500. Why would it collapse all of a sudden? That's what Fei Shi said earlier. A hint of disbelief could be heard in Chen Liao's voice as well. Clearly, she was also shocked by the news, or else she would not have been in such a hurry to relay it to Zhong Xian. Fei Shi. He's the elder standing at the front. He's the person in charge of all affairs relating to the elite division, so you can look for him if you have any problems in the future, Chen Liao said as she gestured to the front. Zhong Xian turned his gaze over as well and saw a middle-aged man standing at the very front. He was surrounded by several students, who seemed to be asking him about something. Did they mention the reason behind the collapse of the mountain gate? The mountain gate had survived several dozen millenniums in the Sanctum of Sages, so why would such a thing suddenly happen at this point in time? Chen Liao pondered for a moment before saying, I'm not too sure, but based on what I heard, it seems like the sculpture of Sage Kuei has shattered. Hearing that, Zhong Xian was confused. What did the shattering of Sage Kuei's sculpture have anything to do with the collapse of the mountain gate? The mountain gate and the folded space were created single-handedly by Sage Kuei, and most of the tests within were also supervised by his will. The shattering of the sculpture means that the will he left behind has dissipated, and without his support, the folded space ended up collapsing as well, Chen Liao replied. This. Zhong Xian frowned. To be honest, he was extremely grateful to Sage Kuei for the help he had offered back during the entrance examination, and he had been planning on returning to find the latter after he gained the strength to activate the Sanctum Head token. Who would have thought that the latter's will would dissipate so swiftly? Zhong Xian sighed deeply. Even if he has spent most of his time over the past several dozen millenniums asleep, it's still inevitable that his life would eventually reach its end. There was a limit to the lifespan of all living beings. Not even Kong Shi was able to free himself from the shackles of time. Even if Sage Kuei was a powerful expert prior to his death, there was still a limit to how long his fragmented soul could survive. If it had remained constantly asleep, he might still have been able to last for quite some time. However, each time a new Sanctum Head candidate appeared, he had to wake up once, and this ended up depleting his lifespan significantly. It had merely been a matter of time before his will dissipated. Indeed. Chen Liao nodded in agreement. Now that Sage Kuei's will has dissipated, it'll be difficult for the next Sanctum Head to establish his position. Difficult for the next Sanctum Head to establish his position? Ah, you must still be unaware of it. According to the rumors, Sage Kuei's will doesn't just sustain the entire Mountain Gate examination. More importantly, he is also the one who is in charge of selecting the next Sanctum Head. In fact, every single Sanctum Head has been personally chosen by him. Now that his will has dissipated, it'll be difficult for the next Sanctum Head to build legitimacy and credence to his position. As one of the top geniuses of the Glacier Plain Court, Chen Liao had her own connections. While these matters might have been confidential secrets in the Sanctum of Sages, it was not too difficult for her to learn this much from her sources. Hearing those words, Zhong Xian was just about to continue speaking when a resounding voice arose from the center of the room. Turning his head over, Zhong Xian saw that the one who was speaking was Fei Shi. It seems like everyone from the elite division is here. First and foremost, I would like to congratulate every single one of you for successfully becoming a student of the Sanctum of Sages. I'll be accompanying you for the next few years of your journey here, but before I get to anything, I would like each of you to introduce yourself to the others. The people gathered here will be your fellow classmates, and you will be seeing one another frequently in your time in the Sanctum of Sages. So, it would be good for you all to familiarize yourselves with one another as soon as possible. Alright, in first place, Feng Zi. Zhong Xian turned his gaze over curiously, wanting to see the face of the top ranker of the entrance examination. Feng Zi had outperformed even those of the Zhong clan to come top in the entrance examination. From this feat alone, there was no doubt that the other party was a person of great capability. A young man who appeared to be in his mid-20s walked out. He had an ordinary-looking exterior, no imposing aura or dashing appearance. He was the type of person who would blend right into the crowd if one did not pay close attention to him. However, under the assessment of Zhong Xian's eye of insight, he could still clearly perceive the fearsome flow of energy that coursed through Feng Zi's body like the rapid tides of a river. There was little doubt that this fearsome flow of energy could be converted into devastating might within moments if willed so. Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage. He's indeed a formidable individual. Zhong Xian nodded. A cultivator had to possess unthinkable talent in order to possess such strength in his mid-20s. My name is Feng Zi. The young man simply introduced his own name before falling silent. It would have seemed silly if anyone else had done the same, but for the mysterious Feng Zi, such actions only seemed to deepen the enigma around him. In second place, Zhong Yu. Fei Shi announced. He had the details concerning every single student who enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages, but if Feng Zi was unwilling to say anything more about himself, it was not be his place to talk too much either. Following the announcement, another young man stepped forward and clasped his fist. This young man appeared to be even younger than Feng Zi, around his early 20s, but his strength did not feel any weaker than the latter's. It felt like he could bring forth a calamitous storm with just a wave of his hand. My name is Zhong Yu, and I'm from the Zhong clan. I hope that we can work together and strive for greatness. In contrast to Feng Zi's cold disposition, Zhong Yu spoke with a warm smile on his face. Under the scanning of the Eye of Insight, Zhong Xian found that there were no major flaws to be found in Zhong Yu's physical body, zhenqi, or soul, which made his strength exceptionally wholesome. In comparison, the other offspring of the Zhong clan that he knew of, such as Zhong Zhouxiao, Zhong Qian, or even Zhong Yunfeng, were truly not even worth mentioning. If the two of them were to go all out in a battle, even though Zhong Yu's cultivation was only at Grand Dominion Realm Advanced Stage, Zhong Xian was not confident that he would be the one to emerge victorious in the end. As one of the inner members of the Zhong clan, Zhong Yu's bloodline ability was bound to be far stronger than Zhong Qian's. Along with the various profound battle techniques and powerful means he would have learned in the Zhong clan, Zhong Yu likely possessed the strength to rival opponents several cultivation stages stronger than him as well. Following Zhong Yu was Yuan Haiqing, by Qingxian. Zhong Xian assessed every single one of them carefully, and while most of the rest came nowhere close to comparing to Feng Zi and Zhong Yu, they still left him feeling deeply bewildered. It was no wonder these clans and powers were able to remain at the top of the master-teacher continent for so many years. They really did possess exceptional means in cultivating the talents of the younger generation. All in all, the only one who could be said to have truly come from a humble background among the 50 students of the elite division was him. It seems like the master-teacher continent is rather similar to my previous world. Due to the difference in upbringing and resources available to each individual, the powerful grow even more powerful whereas the weak grow even weaker. This gap will only continue to widen with time. Zhong Xian sighed deeply. The stronger powers and clans had high-ranked master teachers amid their ranks and superior resources, thus allowing them to provide the best upbringing for their younglings right from the very start. This was not something that ordinary clans could afford to do. As for those who had paved their way forward a step at a time, rising from the humble Tianxian kingdom all the way up here, well, such cases could be said to be practically non-existent. In a sense, Zhong Xian's case could be considered a miracle among miracles. It was really no wonder others automatically assumed that he was an offspring of the Zhong clan. It did not take too long for the front 49 students to finish introducing themselves. Last but not least, Zhong Xian. As soon as those words were spoken, all eyes in the room immediately turned toward Zhong Xian. Despite not being from the Zhong clan, Zhong Xian had beaten up Zhong Qian and Zhong Yunfeng. This was a sight that everyone had seen with their own eyes back then, and that matter had left a deep impression on them. Zhong Xian introduced himself with a smile. I am Zhong Xian, and I am from the Qingyuan Empire. He's really from the Qingyuan Empire. Despite coming from such a humble place, he still dared to make a move against the Zhong clan. He sure is brazen. But don't you think that it's weird how he was able to defeat Zhong Yunfeng despite being in 50th place? That's indeed rather bizarre. Perhaps, He might even be a secret student of some 9-star master teacher of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Upon hearing Zhong Xian's introduction, the crowd immediately began discussing him in whispers. Considering how Zhong Xian was able to achieve such strength despite being unaffiliated to any powers and the very fact that he dared stand against the Zhong clan fearlessly, there was no one in that room who thought that he was as simple as he had introduced himself to be. All right. Now that you have made your introductions, I shall first talk about some of the basic rules in the Sanctum of Sages that you must abide by, followed by the various aspects you have to take note of when choosing your teacher, Feisha said with a smile. Regarding the rules, they are all thoroughly explained in your identity tokens, so I won't waste your time by going into detail about them. However, there's one thing I would like to remind all of you on. As students of the Sanctum of Sages, you can compete with one another, but under no circumstances should you attempt to claim the life of your peers. If you have any irreconcilable conflict with anyone that you must settle at any cost, you can apply for a master-teacher confrontation with us. As long as 3 elders agree to your request, you'll be accorded a life-and-death contract to carry on with it. Under the terms of the life-and-death contract, the power affiliated with the individual who has lost their life in the master-teacher confrontation must not attempt to exact vengeance against the victor. Hearing those words, Zhong Xian nodded. In a sense, these rules were similar to those of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy. Regardless of whether one was a master teacher or not, wherever humans existed, there was bound to be conflict. Even the most enlightened of individuals were no exception to the rule. Even Kong Shi had also lost his rationality to rage and sorrow before. Conflicts would have to be resolved in a timely and appropriate manner, or else they would only continue growing bigger and bigger. This was also why most organizations, be it master teacher academies or the Sanctum of Sages, had systems in place to deal with such situations. Otherwise, if an individual was forced to bottle up their hostility and rage due to the rules, it could eventually lead to them committing far worse acts. As for the selection of teachers, I only have a very simple piece of advice for you all. Choose a teacher who is aligned with your strengths. The fact that you were able to rise above the other 10,000 candidates means that you possess an outstanding talent or skill. As such, I hope that you can sharpen this strength of yours and bring it to its very limits. Following which, Feisha began introducing some of the more formidable master teachers and exceptionally talented individuals of the other occupations in the Sanctum of Sages. Upon hearing these introductions, Zhong Xian shook his head in disinterest. The Library of Heaven's Path was far better than any teacher he could have. As such, this topic held no purpose to him at all. Fairy Liao, do you still have any more of the wintry spirit essence that you gave me previously? May I buy some of it from you? According to what Sun Qiong had said, it seemed like it would be difficult for him to obtain pinnacle spirit stones without entering the inner sanctum, and the other alternatives seemed to be rather troublesome as well. However, upon seeing Fairy Liao, he suddenly remembered the wintry spirit essence. He had consumed some previously, and it had been extremely effective on him. He could raise his cultivation swiftly with it. I do have some wintry spirit essence, but I'm planning on using it to push for a breakthrough to Grand Dominion Realm, Chen Liao replied hesitantly. The young man was her benefactor, as well as the teacher of their young court chief. Under normal circumstances, she would not have turned down any request he had of her, but she really needed the wintry spirit essence to push for a breakthrough, so it was not convenient for her to give it away. On the other hand, Zhong Xian's eyes lit up upon hearing those words. If I can help you achieve a breakthrough to Grand Dominion Realm without using the wintry spirit essence, would you be willing to sell your wintry spirit essence to me? If you can help me achieve a breakthrough, I'll give the wintry spirit essence straight to you, Chen Liao said. Chapter 1333 Offering pointers to Chen Liao. There was no treasure that was more important than raising one's own cultivation realm. If Zhong Xian could help her push for a breakthrough to the Grand Dominion Realm right now, even if she were to give the wintry spirit essence straight to the other party, she would still have one big time. Good. Zhong Xian smiled in delight. He was just about to get Chen Liao to execute a punching routine so that he could offer her some pointers when he suddenly heard a voice. Brother Zhong. Zhong Xian turned around and saw a young man standing not too far away from him. Zhong Zhuo. Zhong Xian frowned. The other party was none other than Zhong Yunfeng's cousin, the person ranked 31st place in the entrance examination. Just as I said yesterday, I am interested in testing out Brother Zhong. Since it's a free interaction time right now, I would like to invite you to a duel. Zhong Zhuo clasped his fist respectfully. He showed no hint of arrogance due to his identity as an offspring of the Zhong clan. Free interaction time? Zhong Xian took a quick glance at his surroundings and saw that while he was chatting with Chen Laiyao, Fei Shi had already stopped talking to allow the students to familiarize themselves with one another. As geniuses of the Sanctum of Sages, they spoke not only through words but their capabilities as well. As such, there was quite a number of people who had come to blows with one another. This. Zhong Xian frowned. In truth, Zhong Zhuo's challenge meant nothing much to him. Even if he was ranked 31st place in the entrance examination, it would not take Zhong Xian too much to defeat him. However, he had depleted all of his junshi after executing the sea-severing sword twice in the corridor of puppets, and while he had managed to recover a bit of his strength since then, he was still in no state to fight against a cultivator of Zhong Zhuo's caliber. What? Is Brother Zhong unwilling to face me in a battle? Zhong Zhuo narrowed his eyes playfully. Considering how many freshmen had been watching in the square yesterday, it would have been bad to his reputation if the offspring of the Zhong clan kept challenging Zhong Xian in succession. Today, every single student of the elite division was around, so this was a good opportunity to suppress the other party's haughtiness. He was determined to have the other party learn that not everyone could afford to offend their Zhong clan. It's just a duel. Why would I be unwilling to face you in a battle? I only fear that I will fail to keep my strength in check and accidentally cripple you. It would be a pity if something like that hurts the camaraderie we have as fellow students of the elite division, Zhong Xian replied calmly. While he might have depleted his junshi, he still had plenty of means to deal with a mere Grand Dominion Realm primary stage cultivator. At the very worst, he would just let his clone out to bite at the other party. Alas, that fellow was a little too aggressive and hard to control. It would be a little embarrassing if he accidentally crippled Zhong Zhuo while he was at it. You! Zhong Zhuo's face darkened. Harumphing coldly, he beckoned with his hand and said, "Since you are willing to accept my challenge, let's begin." After saying those words, he turned around and walked to the center of the hall. I guess it can't be helped then. Zhong Xian sighed deeply as he got up and walked over as well. However, barely after he could take a step, Chen Laiyao suddenly blocked the path ahead of him. "Zhongshu, you have depleted your junshi, haven't you?" Chen Laiyao sent a telepathic message over. "You can tell?" Zhong Xian was slightly taken aback. He had not told the other party about the matter of his junshi running dry, and he did not think that he had showed any hint that would betray that either. Thus, he could not help but be slightly surprised to see that Chen Laiyao was able to see through it. "Your acupoints were wide open while you were talking earlier, absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy desperately to replenish your junshi. With just a look, it's apparent that you are suffering from severe depletion of junshi," Chen Laiyao explained. "How can you fight with another in the state you are currently in? Why don't I help you turn down the battle instead? Even if he's from the Zhong clan, he should at least sell me this favor." Ultimately, the foundation of a cultivator lay in their junshi. Admittedly, experts of their level could draw on incredible strength from their physical bodies and primordial spirits too, but to fight without junshi was similar to a tiger attempting to hunt down its prey without its fangs and claws. Zhong Xian shook his head. "I will lose my honor and reputation if I turn down his challenge." To be honest, he cared about nothing of that sort, but considering that the other party was from the Zhong clan and had provoked him first, what a pity it would be if he were to let this precious opportunity to pummel the other party into the ground slip by. "But you won't be able to fight in your current state," Chen Laiyao exclaimed. It was not that she harbored any special feelings for the young man before her. However, just on the basis that the young man was the teacher of their young court chief, she could not allow any harm to come to him. Otherwise, if the young court chief started assigning blame for the matter, there was no way she could take responsibility. This. Zhong Xian frowned. He knew that he could only rely on other means to resolve this situation, too, and he was actually planning on finding an opportunity to slip off for a moment to change his clothes. However, a thought suddenly came to his mind in this moment, and he asked, Fairy Liao, why don't you fight for me instead? You want me to take your place? Chen Liao was stunned for a moment before hurriedly shaking her head. The only reason I was able to get into the elite division is due to my secret art. As such, my fighting prowess is still lacking compared to most of the others in the elite division. I fear that I won't stand a chance against Zhongzhuo. Her cultivation was only at leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle at the moment. In the eyes of others, she could be considered an astounding genius, but compared to Zhongzhuo, she was still severely lacking. If they were to clash in a real battle, the one who would fall was indubitably her. Who said that you don't stand a chance against Zhongzhuo? Zhongxian patted Chen Liao's shoulder reassuring before walking up to Zhongzhuo. Brother Zhong, I would love to accept your challenge, but I happen to be at a crucial moment in my cultivation, so it won't be convenient for me to fight with you right now. Why don't I have Fairy Liao fight in my place instead, and I'll offer her pointers by the side. If you are able to defeat her, I'll consider it my loss. Crucial moment in your cultivation? Zhongzhuo harumphed coldly. It was obvious that the other party was just finding a random excuse to turn down his challenge. You made a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm before all of us yesterday. Are you trying to tell us that you can still achieve a breakthrough today? Even if you want to give an excuse, surely you can find something that's more logical than that. If you think that you can turn down my challenge with such an excuse, you are dreaming. The previous day, he had asked Zhong Qian and Zhong Yunfeng about the conflict they had with Zhong Xian, and it seemed like everything had started from this Chen Liao. Since she was intent on standing up for Zhong Xian, he did not mind teaching her a lesson. He knew that the young lady was far weaker than him, and if they were to really clash with one another, he would be able to defeat her easily within 3 moves. Fairy Liao, are you sure you want to stand up for him? Zhongzhuo directed a cold gaze toward Chen Liao. Chen Liao's eyebrows shot up. She had only intended to dissuade Zhong Xian from fighting in the duel, but who would have thought that she would suddenly be dragged out to fight the duel instead? However, due to how loudly the both of them had spoken, everyone had already turned their gazes over. At this point, it was already too late for her to back down. That's right. If you wish to have a fight with Zhongshe, you'll have to get past me first, Chen Liao replied coolly. Very well. Let me see how powerful your glacier plane court is then. Harumphing coldly, Zhongshuo's figure vanished with a swift step forward. His fingers were cupped in a shape reminiscent of a bowl as they crushed down heavily upon Chen Liao. This technique was not a battle technique, and it looked incredibly straightforward. However, the instant that his palm fell, the surrounding space was immediately sealed, forcing Chen Liao to face him head-on. Facing such a situation, Chen Liao's eyes narrowed slightly as a hint of panic flashed through her eyes. With her current fighting prowess, she could only match Zhong Qian. She would have trouble fighting even Zhong Yunfeng, let alone the stronger Zhongzhuo. The moment that Zhongzhuo's palm fell, she immediately felt her zhenqi slowing. Even if she were to gather all of her strength to counterattack, she still would not be able to withstand Zhongzhuo's attack. Move half a step to the left and stab your finger rightward as if a sword. Just as Chen Liao was feeling utterly helpless, a voice suddenly sounded calmly by her ears, Zhongxian. I guess I have no other choice. Seeing that there was no better alternative before her, she slid her feet to the left and pierced her finger forward. Pada. Her movements were slight, but it caused Zhongzhuo's palm strike to miss with a resounding sonic boom. At the same time, her finger also accurately pierced an opening in Zhongzhuo's offense, catching him off guard for an instant. It must be a coincidence, Zhongzhuo thought as he hurriedly retracted his hand and took a step back. Left hand, sword traversing into the sea. Right hand, dragon soars into the wilderness. Zhongxian continued issuing instructions. Just as Chen Liao was feeling deeply despaired, she saw that she had actually successfully fended off Zhongzhuo's attack by following Zhongxian's instructions. In an instant, confidence filled her heart. Without any hesitation, she continued obeying the latter's instructions, executing a sword art in her left hand and a palm art in her right. In terms of strength, she was far from comparing to Zhongzhuo, but through executing the 2 moves simultaneously, she managed to seal off the latter's attack trajectory, forcing the latter to take up a defensive position. Zhongzhuo also could tell that the momentum of the battle was against him at the moment, and a forceful attempt to go on the offensive could only result in him getting injured. Thus, he had no choice but to continue retreating. Ursi majoris steps, quenching of the three yang, Zhong Xian instructed. Chen Liao immediately began shuffling her feet, executing the Ursi majoris steps. At the same time, her finger tapped forward, seemingly drawing out a triangle in the air, as she drove her zhenqi for the other party's three yang meridians. These moves were not particularly profound, but they were apt for the current circumstances. It coincidentally sealed off the zhenqi circulation pathway of the next move that Zhongzhuo was going to execute, leaving him feeling so stifled that he could spurt blood. Something is very weird here, Zhongzhuo thought as he leaped backward in alarm. What is Zhongzhuo up to? Chen Liao's moves should be extremely easy to deal with. Why is he not defending against them, choosing to retreat again and again instead? Extremely easy to deal with? Are you honestly saying those words? Look at where Chen Liao's finger is pointing. If he attempted to retaliate, his Kai-Hai acupoint would have been struck. If he attempted to charge forth, his Ziyang acupoint would have been kicked. If he attempted to flank from the left, his Huai-Hai acupoint would have been slammed by her shoulder. If he attempted to flank from the right, he would have been faced with an even more intense barrage of attack. In such a situation, there's no choice but to retreat. The battle between the both of them had caught the attention of everyone in the room. Initially, the crowd did not think much of the battle, but as it went on, looks of disbelief gradually began surfacing on their faces. As fellow offspring of powerful clans, they were well aware of the backgrounds of one another. Under normal circumstances, Chen Liao should not have been able to withstand 3 moves from Zhongzhuo. Yet, at this very moment, she actually managed to corner Zhongzhuo to the point that he could not even retaliate. Were Zhong Xian's pointers really that formidable? Interesting. Leaning against the table, Zhong Yu watched the battle with a fascinated look in his eyes. Usually, he would not have much interest in battles such as this, but upon seeing such a sight, his gaze could not help but linger on the battle. For the weak to triumph over the strong, the weak would have to control the flow of battle impeccably, dealing with whatever techniques the strong threw over promptly. To be honest, it was hard for him to believe that Zhong Xian would be able to allow Chen Liao to achieve this much just through his pointers. Deng 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 deng. Before everyone's bewildered gazes, Chen Liao and Zhongzhuo traded 10 more blows, and shockingly, Zhongzhuo did not even manage to fend off a single one. He kept retreating non-stop, and before long, he was backed against the wall. Damn it! Zhongzhuo's face turned livid. This should have been an easy battle for him, but 10 moves had passed, and he had not gotten a chance to counterattack yet. The intense frustration made him feel like he was going to explode. Since this is the case, don't blame me for not having mercy on you. Seeing that there was no longer any path to escape to, Zhongzhuo narrowed his eyes, and a powerful surge of energy began gushing through his body. Chapter 1334 Chen Liao's breakthrough. That's the power of his unique bloodline? Sensing the abrupt surge in Zhongzhuo's aura, everyone was taken aback. It was just a friendly spar between fellow students. Was there a need to tap into such a mutually harming trump card? No, it isn't the power of his unique bloodline. Rather, it's a secret art he has been practicing for quite a while. Once it's activated, even Grand Dominion Realm intermediate stage cultivators would struggle to match his might. A young man from the Zhong clan explained with a smile. Tapping into the power of one's unique bloodline would inflict massive damage upon one, and one would have to rest for at least a month after that. For this reason, not even those of the Zhong clan would resort to it easily. But even without tapping into the power of their unique bloodline, the Zhong clan was still the #1 sage clan on the Master-Teacher continent. They possessed plenty of secret arts which could raise their fighting prowess swiftly within a short moment. Cornered by a young lady whose strength was far beneath his time and time again, Zhongzhuo's frustration eventually hit its limit, and unable to tolerate it any longer, he resorted to his secret arts. Things are going to get hard for Chen Liao. Indeed. She might be able to claim the upper hand for the time being with her superior skills, but in the face of absolute strength, she won't be able to hold on for too long. The crowd didn't think that the situation was too optimistic for Chen Liao. It was true that technique would allow one to overcome an opponent stronger than one, but there was a limit to that as well. Otherwise, cultivators wouldn't have to cultivate relentlessly in seek of greater strength. In the view of the crowd, Chen Liao had only managed to clinch a temporary upper hand, but the situation was still unfavorable to her. The massive gap between Zhong Zhuo and her ability would eventually result in the tables turning on her. Her defeat was inevitable, it was just a matter of time. Hearing the discussion from the crowd, Chen Liao's expression also turned grim. Just as she was at a loss as to what she should do, Zhong Xian's voice suddenly sounded in her ear once more, traversing crane palm, third form. At this point, obeying Zhong Xian's instructions had already become a reflexive action to her. Without even thinking about it, she had already raised her arm, and reminiscent to a soaring divine crane, she pressed it down upon Zhong Zhuo. The traversing crane palm was a technique created by a senior in the Glacier Plain Court while watching the flight trajectory of cranes. It was a technique which harnessed very little strength, but the speed of its attacks was extraordinary. Furthermore, the complicated trajectories of its movements also made it even harder for the opponent to cope with the battle technique. And the third form harnessed the very essence of the traversing crane palm. Once activated, a sight reminiscent of a beautiful crane spreading open its wings and soaring into the heavens would unfold before the eyes of the onlookers. Pa. The spreading of the wings was swiftly accompanied with the crisp echo of a palm accurately falling on Zhong Zhuo's face. A slap. Zhong Zhuo just got slapped. The surroundings were abruptly plunged into silence, and even Chen Liao was stunned by the situation before her. Chen Liao's attack was extremely swift, allowing her to catch others off guard, but considering Zhong Zhuo's cultivation realm, he should have been able to dodge her attack easily. Yet, he still ended up being struck squarely in the face, leaving 5 clear fingerprints on his face. This was simply too shocking. Not only was Chen Liao dazed, Zhong Zhuo, who had just undergone a power-up after activating his secret art, was completely dumbstruck as well. It took a long while before he recovered from his shock, and his zhenqi began surging from his sheer rage. Bastard, I'm going to kill you. Zhong Zhuo's eyes turned bloody red, and veins were popping up from his forehead. It was already a great embarrassment for him to be cornered by a person whose strength was far lower than his, but as if that wasn't enough, he was even dealt a resounding slap to his face. The humiliation he felt burned down every last shred of rationality he had. Hong Long. Driven by his rage, his energy began gushing out as if a burst dam, and in an instant, his aura had already grown 2 times stronger than before. Under the overwhelming power which he was emanating, Chen Liao was forced to retreat again and again with a pale face. She just had to mess with the wrong opponent. Zhong Yu remarked with a leisure smile as he lay on the table and watched the situation in interest. Achem. A young man seated not too far away from Zhong Yu shot a curious glance over. The secret art which Zhong Zhuo is using is called the Searing Blood Formula. It uses one's blood essence as fuel to temporarily boost one's fighting prowess significantly. Under normal circumstances, it would only be able to raise one's strength by 30%, but due to the sheer rage from the humiliation he had suffered, the effects of the Searing Blood Formula ended up being amplifying his strength by 2-fold instead. At the current moment, Zhong Zhuo's strength is already comparable to a Grand Dominion Realm intermediate stage cultivator. If Chen Liao hadn't dealt that slap, she might have still been able to last a little longer in the battle, but now. I can only wish her the best of luck. Zhong Yu's words were very clear. Chen Liao had won the battle but lost the war. She might have managed to embarrass Zhong Zhuo, but her actions ended up amplifying his strength instead, and the eventual result of it would be her own suffering. From such a sense, Chen Liao has indeed dug her own grave. Zhong Zhuo has always been known to be a cold person. To him, there's only friends and foes. He wouldn't go easy on his opponent just because she's a lady. The young man shook his head. Even he would have trouble coping with Zhong Zhuo after his abrupt surge in strength, let alone that leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle young lady. While the both of them were chatting, Zhong Zhuo's strength had finally hit its peak. Just by taking a single step forward, Chen Liao immediately felt the air around her distorting disturbingly. She suddenly felt as if she was bound by ropes, and no matter how she struggled, she was unable to shake free from it. This is really bad. With a flustered look, the young lady turned to Zhongxian and said, Zhongshe, what should I do? She had made her moves strictly according to Zhongxian's instructions, but who could have thought that she would only end up provoking Zhongxue further, resulting in the situation completely going out of control. I guess there's nothing to be done. Given how much his strength has increased, you won't be a match for him in your current state, Zhongxian said as he stretched his back lazily. But a hint of despair flickered across Chen Liao's face when she heard those words, and she nearly burst into tears. I also know that I'm no match for him as well, but am I really going to be beaten up by him? You really need to have more flexibility in your thoughts. Since you aren't able to defeat him with your current strength, all you have to do is to achieve a breakthrough then. Zhongxian shook his head in disappointment. Achieve a breakthrough? Chen Liao was stunned. Do you really think I am like you, capable of achieving a breakthrough as and when I like? If it's that easy to reach Grand Dominion Realm, I would have already succeeded a month ago. I wouldn't have been stuck at my current realm at so long. That's right. Zhongxian nodded. From this moment on, heed my words very closely. There's no need to be afraid or panic, it's just a mere breakthrough to Grand Dominion Realm. 10 breaths is all it takes. 10 breaths. Chen Liao nearly fainted from rage. Aren't you bragging a little too much over here? On top of having one's zhenqi accumulated beyond a certain point, one must also achieve some comprehension of the spatial laws in order to reach Saint 6 Dan Grand Dominion Realm. Due to that, there were simply too many talented geniuses on the master-teacher continent who found their footsteps halted at this point, unable to push for a breakthrough. Even the most talented genius of our glacier plane court took 3 whole months for her breakthrough. And you're telling me that you would make me to do it within 10 breaths? Even the most unreliable of salesmen wouldn't dare to utter such big word. 10 breaths. He can't be serious, can he? In the first place, don't you think that it's ridiculous for a leaving Aperture Realm primary stage to offer guidance to a leaving Aperture Realm pinnacle in making a breakthrough? To make promises which is unable to uphold, that fellow is really unworthy of being a master teacher. Zhongxian didn't bother concealing his voice, so everyone in the room heard his words loud and clear. They looked at one another with faces marked with disbelief. You really need to know what you can brag about and what you can't. At this rate, you are just only going to be humiliated by your own word. By the side, a deep frown appeared on Fei Shi's face as well. Even he didn't think that it was possible for Chen Liao to make a breakthrough within 10 breaths. You want to make a breakthrough? Dream on. Zhongxue roared as he raised his palm, and overwhelming might gushed toward the young lady standing opposite to him. Chen Liao felt her bones being pushed to their limits under the sheer pressure of the palm. She wanted to escape, but she realized that her escape routes had been completely sealed, leaving her completely helpless. Lost and not knowing what to do, Zhongxian's voice suddenly sounded in her ears once more. Lonesome footsteps, second form. Drive your zhenqi using the glacier formula into your Tianmen acupoint and Qixin acupoint. All right. Knowing that she had no other choice but to put her trust in Zhongxian, she gritted her teeth and made her move. Instead of retreating, she chose to head forward instead. The second form of the lonesome footsteps was a forward dash maneuver. I'm doomed. With a pale face, Chen Liao prepared herself for the very worst. She moved instinctively upon hearing the instructions, not bothering to think the actions through. Even from afar, Zhongshue's palm was already one which she couldn't withstand. Charging right over would only increase the force of the other party's palm, pushing her further down the cliff. Barely after dashing forward by 2 meters, the pressure before her had already increased by 2-fold. Not only were her bones tightly pressed together now, even her muscles were pushed to their limits, as if they would be torn to shreds at any moment. Forget it, I have no other choice now. I'll just have to put my trust my Zhongshu's judgment. Chen Liao despaired, but she knew that there was no longer any alternatives before her. Thus, she began driving her zhenqi according to the glacier formula, channeling her energy toward her Tianmen acupoint and Qixin acupoint. These 2 acupoints were the crux to achieving a breakthrough to Grand Dominion Realm. Naturally, she had attempted to open these 2 acupoints several times in the past, but her attempts had all ended in failure. But surprisingly, she felt her zhenqi flowing smoother than ever instead. The immense pressure weighing down on her was facilitating the movement of her zhenqi forward. In this moment, she couldn't help but feel that the other party wasn't attacking her but aiding her in her breakthrough. Boom! Under the furious torrent of zhenqi channeled to them, the Tianmen acupoint and Qixin acupoints were swiftly opened up. Following which, Chen Liao's vision suddenly blurred for a moment. Lines had appeared before her. She couldn't tell for sure, but they appeared to be the folds of space. She instinctively reached forward to grab at them, and a surge of power suddenly coiled around her body. Half-Grand Dominion Realm, reached. She really achieved a breakthrough? How did she do it? Everyone was flabbergasted to see Chen Liao successfully overcoming her bottleneck in less than 2 breaths after dashing into Zhongshua's attack. The sight was simply so shocking that it seemed to sap the oxygen out of their lungs. Every single one of them had thought that Zhongxian was just bragging, but who could have thought that he really wielded the power to make the impossible happen? Not only was the crowd shocked, even Chen Liao's body was shaking from sheer agitation. Disbelief could be seen in her eyes, reflecting how inconceivable the situation was to her as well. She had pushed herself time and time again for a breakthrough, but no matter what she did, she was simply unable to break through the ceiling that was capping her strength. It was unbelievable to her how that ceiling could be shattered so easily. Switch to the Yang formula, drive your zhenqi through the 3 meridians of the Yin formula. In her moment of agitation, Zhongxian's voice continued sounding. Not daring to hesitate in the slightest, Chen Liao swiftly drove her zhenqi strictly to how the young man had instructed her to do so. Boom! There was a slight jolt in her meridians, and all of a sudden, Chen Liao felt the palm strike which Zhongzhua was pushing toward her lightening considerably. Following which, a feeling of unprecedented harmony resonated through her body, and the power which had coiled around her body previously began to expand outward. Under normal circumstances, if one's zhenqi was unable to keep up with the expansion of one's dominion, one would suffer severe injuries. However, due to her driving her Yang formula toward the 3 meridians of the Yin formula, it ended up creating a powerful suction force around her, reminiscent of a black hole. TZZZZZZZZZ. It took only a mere instant for the attack which Zhongzhua was sending over to be devoured clean, and Chen Liao unhesitatingly used it to fuel the expansion of her dominion. Before long, a stable 5 meters light barrier formed around her. I really achieved a breakthrough. Feeling the dominion that had formed around her and the overwhelming strength flowing through her body, Chen Liao's body froze in shock. She could hardly curb the agitation she was feeling inside. I really achieved a breakthrough. And it has only been 5 breaths. For those who are wondering, dominion works something like gravity to oppose one's movement. So if Chen Liao's movement backward is sealed, she would still be able to move forward. Chapter 1335 Fei Shi's warning. The entire main hall was deathly silent. Including Fei Shi, each and every face that could be seen was marked with shock. Achieving a breakthrough to half-Grand Dominion Realm, that was still acceptable to them. But to make a leap to Grand Dominion Realm just 3 breaths after that due to a single sentence spoken by Zhongxian. There was really no words that could describe their current feelings. They had never heard of anyone being able to make another person achieve a breakthrough so quickly in succession, not even with 9-star master teachers. He sure is a resourceful lad, the leisurely Zhongyu from a moment ago remarked with narrowed eyes. Resourceful? That slap earlier should be an intentional move from Zhongxian's side to anger Zhongzhua. The purpose was to push Zhongzhua's secret art to its limits, maximizing his increment in strength. Zhongyu said with a nod. Secret arts with the ability to raise one's strength significantly are formidable weapons in battle, but there is a fatal flaw in them. The strength derived from them would be all virtual power. Virtual power? The young man not too far away wasn't too sure what Zhongyu meant by those words. Virtual power refers to strength which doesn't belong to one. To make a metaphor, it would be like a bubble. It's possible to increase the size of a bubble to a colossal degree, but as soon as something happens, it would disappear without a trace. Virtual power simply isn't as concrete as the zhenqi one cultivated, and its attributeless nature would make it easy for others to steal as well. Zhongyu harumphed. On the surface, it appeared that Zhong Xian had chosen to make Chen Liao fight the battle in his place, but in truth, right from the very start, it was his intention to have Chen Liao make use of Zhongshua's virtual power to overcome her bottleneck and reach Grand Dominion Rel. The young man could hardly believe what he was hearing. In a battle, the slightest mistake could lead to grievous injuries or even death. To attempt to absorb the power of an opponent and push for a breakthrough in the midst of a battle, isn't that too risky? It wasn't uncommon for powerful experts to infuse their energy into their juniors in order to raise their strength swiftly. This process was otherwise known as cultivation impartation. Cultivation impartation could allow one to achieve a breakthrough swiftly, but its requirement was extremely severe as well. Firstly, the ones conducting and receiving the cultivation impartation must be from the same lineage, practicing the exact same cultivation techniques. Secondly, both parties must be willing to undergo the cultivation impartation, and there must be no resistance in the entire process. Otherwise, the slightest lapse in the process could cause the receiver to lose control of the immense energy being pumped into him and literally explode on the spot. Given how dangerous cultivation impartation was, to attempt to steal the opponent's strength and push for a breakthrough in the midst of a tense battle. Just how confident must a person be in his own strength in order to do so? Zhong Xian must have investigated Zhongshua's background beforehand to gain a thorough understanding of the latter's strength, cultivation techniques, secret arts, and the sort beforehand. Putting that information along with what he knew of Chen Liao, he would be able to craft out scenarios for Chen Liao to safely achieve a breakthrough in the midst of a battle with him. It shouldn't be too difficult to obtain all this information if he were to tap into Chen Liao's connections. A glint flickered across Zhong Yu's eyes as he saw through the crux of the matter. Stealing the opponent's strength to push for a breakthrough in the midst of a battle may seem extremely complicated, but as long as one had a thorough understanding of the fighting prowess of both parties and designed a plausible scenario with countermeasures for unexpected situations in place, there was still a good chance that one would be able to pull it off safely. More importantly, Chen Liao probably isn't as weak as we thought. Most likely, she's already on the verge of a breakthrough. In other words, as shocking as the situation may seem, she was actually collaborating with Zhong Xian to play out a show to garner attention. Otherwise, do you think that a leaving Aperture Realm primary stage cultivator, not to mention one that is unaffiliated with any powers, would possibly possess an understanding of cultivation that surpasses Chen Liao, Zhongzhua, and even us? Zhong Yu said confidently. This. The young man came to a realization. Of course, even if one were to make ample preparations beforehand, pushing for a breakthrough in the midst of battle was still an extremely difficult and risky process. Nevertheless, it was at least at a level where the matter wasn't completely implausible to them anymore. Despite his young age, he sure is scheming. Coming to realize what was going on, the young man harumphed coldly. Those who come to the sanctum of sages dream of leaving a mark on the master-teacher continent, and the best way to do so is to trample on the name of the Zhong clan. That Zhong Xian sure is an ambitious fellow. Zhong Yu sneered coldly. Do you want me to teach him a lesson in your stead? The young man asked. There's no need for that. He can do whatever he likes as long as he doesn't trample on my toes. If he really is so brazen as to do so, I don't mind teaching him a lesson which he would never forget. Zhong Yu waved his hands leisurely before falling silent. To him, while Zhong Xian did possess some talent, he wasn't a person who posed any threat to his position. While the two of them were discussing this matter by the side, in the middle of the hall, Zhongzhua was nearly losing his mind. The secret art he had used ended up being used as nourishment for Chen Liao's breakthrough. That was another tight slap on his face. His body trembled from the overflowing rage coursing through his body, and with a wrathful roar, he dashed forward once more. All right. Since you have achieved a breakthrough, he should pose no threat to you anymore. It'll do for you to knock him out. Take 3 steps back using the 7th form of the lonesome steps and execute the second move of the vacuum palm. Before Zhongshua's attack could strike, Chen Liao heard Zhong Xian's voice in her ears once more. Without any hesitation, she carried out what was being said, and half a breath later, Zhongzhua stared at Chen Liao with eyes widened with disbelief before collapsing powerlessly to the ground. I won. I actually won. Overwhelmed with agitation, Chen Liao rushed back to Zhong Xian's side and exclaimed in delight. Zhong Yu thought that Zhong Xian had a thorough grasp of her strength, which allowed him to design a situation where she would be able to tap into Zhong Zhuo's power to push for a breakthrough. However, as the person in question, Chen Liao knew very well that she had only met Zhong Xian the previous day, and even though they had spent some time together, she had never executed her moves or displayed his cultivation to him before. In other words, prior to her battle with Zhong Yu, Zhong Xian knew nothing about her abilities at all. Relying solely on his eye of discernment, he was able to analyze the depths of her abilities in the midst of a battle and offer spot-on pointers for her to turn the tables around, not to mention, even allowing her to achieve a breakthrough within 5 breaths. His ability had far exceeded her wildest expectations. It was no wonder why he was able to modify the yin formula and yang formula and resolve the problem which had plagued the glacier plain court for countless dozen millenniums. You should be thankful that this is just a friendly spar. If it had been a life-and-death battle, you would have been long killed. Seeing how excited Chen Liao was, Zhong Xian poured a bucket of cold water over her with his words. In truth, it was only possible to carry out such a situation in a friendly spar. Otherwise, if Zhong Zhuo had executed killing blows one after another right from the start, there would have been nothing Chen Liao could have done to reverse the situation. As such, it would be nigh impossible to replicate this success again. Furthermore, considering that you have achieved a breakthrough by absorbing the strength of another, the foundations of your cultivation is bound to be rather shaky. I'll prepare a cultivation technique for you to reinforce your cultivation later on, so make sure to practice it well so that you don't leave behind any traumas in your cultivation. Zhong Xian continued. Considering that Chen Liao had made a breakthrough on Zhong Zhuo's virtual power, her current breakthrough could be said to be built upon weak foundations. She would have to work hard on reinforcing her cultivation so as to ensure that this wouldn't cause any problem in the future. It was a little troublesome, but this couldn't be helped. After all, not everyone was as talented as him. I understand. Chen Liao nodded. At this moment, she suddenly recalled the agreement they had made earlier and flicked her wrist. Here are 3 bottles of wintry spirit essence. That's all I have at the moment. If Zhongsha has a need for them, feel free to take them. Just as what she had said before, as long as Zhong Xian could help her achieve a breakthrough, she would give the wintry spirit essence to the other party for free. And since the other party had managed to carry out the end of his promise, she wouldn't renege on her words either. Thank you. Zhong Xian's eyes lit up as he took the bottles of wintry spirit essence unreservedly. To be honest, without his guidance, it took at least half to an entire year of accumulation before Chen Liao would be able to make a breakthrough to Grand Dominion realm. Considering how much time he had saved the other party, it wasn't too much for him to receive these as compensation. Zhong Xian uncorked the bottle and felt the concentrated spiritual energy and frigid chill emanating from within. Without any hesitation, he gulped down the entire bottle of wintry spirit essence. Then, he paused for a brief moment before gulping down the other 2 bottles as well. Time waits for no one. It had been nearly a day since he had arrived at the Sanctum of Sages, but he had only raised his cultivation by 2 cultivation stages so far. This was too slow. Since he had already compiled the full leaving aperture realm cultivation technique, he should just push for a breakthrough on the spot. He drank all 3 bottles at once. Chen Liao knew that the young man before him possessed means far beyond her imagination, but even so, she couldn't help but shudder in terror when she saw the young man swallowing 3 whole bottles of the wintry spirit essence at one shot. As soon as the wintry spirit essence entered his body, Zhong Xian immediately drove his heaven's path divine art, and it didn't take long for his depleted zhenqi to be restored completely. Following which, as more and more spiritual energy was converted into zhenqi and deposited into his dantian, his aura grew stronger and stronger. It's truly an honor to be able to witness such an exciting breakthrough. As expected of geniuses of the elite division, the means that every single one of you possesses are truly astounding. Just as Zhong Xian was about to push for a breakthrough to leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle in a single go, he suddenly heard Fei Shi's voice sounding beside him. He turned his head over and saw that Zhong Zhuo had already regained consciousness, and he was currently sitting gloomily by the side. On the other hand, Fei Shi was looking at him with deep agitation reflected on his face. While he harbored the same thoughts as Zhong Yu, thinking that Chen Liao's breakthrough was a carefully planned maneuver between the two beforehand that didn't hinder his deep respect for the young man. Even the most meticulously designed plan could flop if it were to be executed badly. However, I would just like to re-emphasize something over here. No matter what the outcome of the duel is, please consider it as a friendly spar to learn from one another. Don't harbor any grudges against one another over a matter as minor as this. Knowing that the previous battle could very well incur the ire of Zhong Zhuo or even the Zhong clan toward Zhong Xian, Fei Shi stepped in and spoke with a smile. Most of you have come from powerful clans and backgrounds, so I believe you should understand the importance of building up your connections. It's fate that brought all of you together in the same class, so I hope you can treasure the relationship you have with one another. Even if you were to rise to a great position in the future, these connections you forge with one another here will surely help you all greatly in the future. Indeed, there's no need to sour relations with one another over a friendly spar. Don't worry, Fei Shi. We understand that. Knowing the rationale behind Fei Shi's words, the crowd swiftly chirped in with a smile. Coming from powerful clans and backgrounds, even if they didn't enroll in the Sanctum of Sages, they would still be able to rise through the ranks with ease. The two reasons why they went through the trouble to do so was to, firstly, temper their state of mind through the characters that Kongsha had left behind and the atmosphere that drifted in the Sanctum of Sages, and secondly, build up their connections. With powerful connections, they would be highly valued even when they returned back to their clans, which would aid them in vying for a greater degree of authority in the future. Alright, I won't impose on you all any further. Feel free to speak and interact with one another, and don't forget to select a teacher suited for you later on. Seeing that everyone understood his intentions, Fei Shi decided to speak no more. The crowd also knew that it wasn't easy for them to be gathered together in one place. Once they started cultivating, they would be scattered all over the place. So, they deeply treasured this opportunity to socialize with one another. Looking at this situation with a smile, Fei Shi slowly made his way over to Zhong Xian. Zhongshi, I have taken a look at your background, and I must say, it's truly astounding that someone of your age is able to come this far from Tianxian Kingdom. Not only did you become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, you have also successfully crashed 2 Master Teacher Pavilions. To be honest, even I am deeply in awe with your talent. As the person in charge of this class of the elite division, he had read Zhong Xian's profile in advance, and even for someone like him, he couldn't help but find himself filled with respect for Zhong Xian. Even if it was in a remote location like Qingyuan Empire, the fact that he could successfully crash the Master Teacher Pavilion was more than enough to prove his talent and strength. Fei Shi is too polite. Zhong Xian clasped his fist in response. Fei Shi nodded slightly before continuing on. Possessing talent is important, but so is forging connections with others. The Zhong clan is the #1 sage clan in the Master Teacher continent, so I hope that you can make reconciliations with them. It won't be good for you to get into a conflict with them. It hadn't been a day since the young man had arrived in the Sanctum of Sages, but he had already pummeled 3 students from the Zhong clan. This was really putting him at a spot. Chapter 1336 Luo Shenqing visits. As the top sage clan in the Master Teacher continent, the Zhong clan had many offspring in the Sanctum of Sages. As long as they were not the core members of the Zhong clan, it would not cause too much of an uproar to harm them. However, within less than a single day, Zhong Xian had pummeled 3 of them. While they were all the less important inner members, that could still be considered an act of provocation toward the Zhong clan. He might still have been able to make some actions in the shadows to mediate the conflict between both parties had it been any other power, but as for the Zhong clan, it was a power that was not much weaker than the Sanctum of Sages, and he was only an ordinary teacher in it. If Zhong Xian really incurred the ire of the Zhong clan, and the latter sent some of their more formidable offspring at him, there would be nothing he could do at all. As long as the Zhong clan acted within the rules, there would be nothing he could do as a teacher in the Sanctum of Sages. Knowing that the other party was advising him out of goodwill, Zhong Xian clasped his fist politely in response. Thank you for your advice, Fei Shi. I'll take note of that. That would be for the best. As an unaffiliated cultivator, you must pay careful heed to your relationships. It's always better to make friends than enemies. After all, you aren't the Sanctum head. Fei Shi remarked. Sanctum head. Zhongxian looked at Fei Shi with a bewildered look. What did this have to do with being the sanctum head? Seeing the confusion on Zhongxian's face, Fei Shi said, the Sanctum of Sages is a subsidiary of the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters, an organization that is of equal standing to the Combat Master Hall. You should be aware of this matter as well, right? Zhongxian nodded. If one were to view the Master Teacher Pavilion as a feudal empire, the regional Master Teacher Pavilion would be the local governors, responsible for dealing with the issues that occurred in the area. The Combat Master Hall would be the military, under the command of the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters, ready to be dispatched should any conflict or war break out. As for the Sanctum of Sages, it would be something similar to the Imperial Academy, responsible for grooming top-notch geniuses for the Master Teacher Pavilion to shoulder the responsibility of guiding and protecting mankind. As such, the Sanctum of Sages was viewed to be equal standing to the Combat Master Hall. The Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters is a transcendental organization in the Master Teacher continent. As long as one doesn't betray mankind or carry out actions that harms the interest of mankind, the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters would usually take on a neutral position to all conflicts. Naturally, as a subsidiary to the Master Teacher Pavilion Headquarters, it would be inappropriate for the Sanctum of Sages to get too close to any clan or power too, Fei Shi explained. Zhongxian nodded in realization. In a sense, this was similar to how the Combat Master Hall branches would remain unaffiliated to any powers in the region they resided in, or else the Master Teacher Pavilion would swiftly step in and deal with them. The Sanctum of Sages was a place to groom the talents of mankind. Following the ideology of Kong Shi, education without discrimination, anyone who had displayed sufficient talent would be able to enter the Sanctum of Sages and learn. As a result, there were many powerful clans and organizations who had their core members here. If the Sanctum of Sages were to make use of its position to get close to a certain power, they would risk sidelining the others, and that would be at odds with Kong Shi's ideology. The Sanctum Head is the figure who represents the entire Sanctum of Sages. In order to win the respect of others, they must tower over the other students. Take our previous Sanctum Head for example. When he was still a candidate for the position of Sanctum Head, he would frequently challenge the offspring of the Zhong clan, the Luo clan, and the Jiang clan, pummeling them again and again, thus forging a reputation of power for himself. Naturally, as the Sanctum Head, he didn't have to fear offending others, and he didn't have to butter up to anyone either. On the contrary, through displaying his strength, he would be able to better earn the recognition of others. However, the same can't be said about you. As an ordinary student, it would be best for you to maintain a low profile. There are simply too many geniuses in the Sanctum of Sages. Despite your incredible background, you are still considerably lacking compared to the true geniuses, Fei Shi warned. Zhongxian's experiences could be said to be legendary, but if one were to compare him with the little princess of the Luo clan and the young prodigy of the Zhong clan, he was still too lacking. This was especially so for the former. In just 2 years after arriving in the Sanctum of Sages, she had already cleared nearly all the trials here. And when someone asked her the reason for doing so, her reply was that she was simply too bored. To clear all the difficult trials just because she was bored. The little princess's words had truly dealt a huge mental trauma to all the geniuses in the Sanctum of Sages back then. While Zhongxian was a very talented individual, he still paled in comparison to those monsters. I understand. Zhongxian stroked his lower jaw contemplatively and nodded. The preceding Sanctum heads before him had gone around challenging others, showing blatant disregard for the prestige of the other clans and powers. It seemed like he had really been too low profile all this time. To destroy only a corridor of puppets and pummel 3 offspring of the Zhong clan so far, it really did feel like he was not doing enough. It would be difficult for him considering his humble personality and his motto of maintaining a low profile, but for the sake of building up prestige for his inauguration as the next Sanctum head, he had no choice but to force himself to go high profile. If Fei Shi were to learn of Zhongxian's thoughts, he might very well faint from anger. Even though the other Sanctum heads were high profile, they only did so after building up a powerful foundation, cultivating for a century or even several centuries before rising to the top in a single shot. Yet, this fellow. On the very first day after arriving at the Sanctum of Sages, when his cultivation was only at leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, he was thinking of how to wreak havoc. There was not a single preceding Sanctum head who had been as unruly as him. Seeing that Zhongxian understood what he was getting at, Fei Shi nodded in approval. It's good that you understand. Over the next 2 days, find an opportunity to apologize to those of the Zhong clan. Possessing great talent was not frightening. Only those who knew how to adapt and could live till a ripe old age were truly fearsome. He harbored great expectations in Zhongxian, and naturally, he did not wish to see the latter being suppressed by others in his time at the Sanctum of Sages, resulting in the stagnation of his growth. Apologize. Zhongxian frowned. That's right. It'll be extremely helpful to your future if you can get on good terms with them. For one, if you can just obtain the position of an honorary elder in the Zhong clan, you won't have to fear not having sufficient resources for your cultivation. With their help, you'll be able to rise to the top of the master-teacher continent easily, Fei Shi explained. What unaffiliated cultivators tended to lack was resources, be it spirit stones or cultivation technique manuals. If Zhongxian could obtain those too, he would surely be able to advance his cultivation swiftly. Honorary elder? Yes. Powers as big as the Zhong clan often establish systems similar to empires and sects. In addition to their clan members, they also have many subordinate powers and experts under them, and a huge bulk of their power actually comes from them, Fei Shi remarked. Of course, considering that you are a master teacher, it would be best if you could join the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. However, there are many requirements and tests one has to undergo in order to enter the headquarters, so that course of path will be much more difficult. I see. Zhongxian came to a realization. In essence, what Fei Shi was saying was that the extent of the Zhong clan's influence did not just stop at their own clan members. It would be more accurate to liken it to a warship with countless frigates surrounding and protecting it. There were many unaffiliated cultivators who would try to forge a good relationship with the powerful clans or organizations so that they could join them after graduating from the Sanctum of Sages. Of course, the best option for master teachers was to get into the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, but it was terribly difficult to do so. The Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters only accepted the strongest of experts across the entire Master Teacher continent, such that even experts like Fei Shi were unqualified to join their ranks. Alright, before I stop right here, let me just offer you one last piece of advice. The Sanctum of Sages revolves around connections, and the Zhong clan is a power in the Master Teacher continent that one cannot circumvent. I hope you can choose what is best for you, Fei Shi said earnestly before he turned around to leave. At this moment, however, a student suddenly rushed over and exclaimed, Fei Shi, bad news. The King of Destruction is here. King of Destruction? What is he doing here? Fei Shi was taken aback. The King of Destruction was a figure in the Sanctum of Sages that left all the teachers and personnel with a huge headache. He loved to challenge trials, or maybe, it would be more accurate to say that he loved to cause destruction under the pretext of challenging trials. Wherever he appeared, pandemonium was soon to follow. As a result, it did not take long for his presence to be associated with trouble. Just that, they were in the Hall of Attainment, a place where lessons were held. Why would the fellow run over here? There were no trials for him to destroy here. I don't know either, but he's currently making his way over. Barely after those words were spoken, a tall, dashing young man suddenly barged into the main hall. As soon as he stepped in, he began scanning the room, as if trying to find a certain someone. Several figures immediately walked up to Luo Shenqing to block his path, and one of them coldly bellowed with a frown, Luo Shenqing, this is where the classes of the elite division are located. If you're here to cause trouble, I'll have to ask you to leave. He was the genius of the Zhong clan, Zhong Yu. Elite division? Wow, how formidable. You speak as if that's a huge deal. Let me tell you, back when I was in the elite division, you were still playing with mud. Don't waste my time. Scram to the side. Luo Shenqing replied coldly with a wave of his hand. Given that they were from two of the strongest clans on the Master Teacher continent, the two were long acquainted with one another. You. To be told such words in public, Zhong Yu's face turned livid. Not wanting to waste his breath with the other party, Luo Shenqing waved his hand impatiently. Scram! Boom! A rampaging might suddenly swept across the area, and before Zhongyu could even process what was going on, he was already sent flying across the room. Pada! He was slammed forcefully into the wall, unable to move at all. Even though Zhongyu possessed incredible talent, due to the difference in their ages, he was still nowhere close to being a match for the older Luo Shenqing. Upon seeing that Luo Shenqing had made a move on Zhongyu, the other offspring of the Zhong clan immediately rushed forward with hostile looks on their faces. However, before they could even get close, Luo Shenqing waved his hand once more. In an instant, as if smacking away flies, the offspring of the Zhong clan were all slammed into the wall as well. Even though Luo Xuanqing's actions might have seemed violent, his actions were actually well controlled. He had only smacked them to the wall, taking care not to hurt them severely. Unable to take it any longer, Feisha stepped forward and said, Luo Shenqing, this is the elite division. There's nothing for you to destroy over here. You'd better leave right now. No matter what, he was still the person in charge of this class. If he remained idle when his students were being slammed into the wall by another, it would not reflect well on him either. I'll leave after I find the person I'm looking for. Luo Shenqing waved his hand as he continued looking around the room. All of a sudden, his eyes lit up. Zhong Xian, right? I've been looking for you. You've been looking for me? Zhong Xian was taken aback. He's here to find Zhong Xian? Luo Shenqing is known to be a very violent individual. It seems like Zhong Xian is in for a good beating. Well, he's as obstinate as a mule, listening to no one but his younger sister. It seems like Zhong Xian has offended him somehow, so he decided to come over here to exact vengeance. Over the years, he has beaten up nearly all of the seniors and juniors in the school. I bet that Zhong Xian is a goner. Hearing the words of the crowd, the eyes of Zhong Zhuo and the others lit up. Luo Shenqing was known throughout the Sanctum of Sages as an unreasonable individual. The very fact that they had been smacked into the wall when they had not even done anything was more than enough to show that. Now that Zhong Xian had been eyed by Luo Shenqing, he would surely be pummeled to the point where he would regret being born in this world. That's right, brother. Come with me. I have something big to talk to you about. Before Zhong Xian could even process what was going on, Luo Shenqing had already grabbed his neck with a hearty laughter and dragged him out. Zhong Zhuo, Zhongyu, and the others. Aren't you the king of destruction? Where is the fight you promised us? Hey, you should play the rules, shouldn't you? The Imperial Academy, or Taishua, was the highest rank of education establishment between the Han to the Sui dynasty, providing the Han dynasty with well-educated bureaucrats. Chapter 1337. A group of eccentrics. 1. Zhong Xian was completely stunned. He had only met this brother-in-law of his once in the past, and the latter had even sent him flying with a punch. Why would the latter suddenly come to look for him? Could it be that he had come to learn of his relationship with Ruoxin and was agreeable to it? As these thoughts flashed across his mind, Zhong Xian could not help but tremble in agitation. If he could receive the approval of this future brother-in-law of his, things would be much more convenient for him in the future. Following the other party out of the elite division, Zhong Xian was just about to speak when his body suddenly shuddered. A cold burst of energy suddenly rose from the depths of his body. I forgot about the matter of my breakthrough. After consuming the wintry spirit essence, before he even had chance to cultivate, Feisha had suddenly come over to talk to him. Right after that, his future brother-in-law suddenly appeared and dragged him out hurriedly. Even the geniuses of the Glacier Plain Court could be turned into ice pops if they drank a single sip of the wintry spirit essence directly, and Zhong Xian drank 3 bottles successively. Had it been anyone else, there was no doubt that the person would have already frozen to death by now. While Zhong Xian was able to endure it due to his possession of the Heaven's Pathshanchi, he could not last too long without assimilating the energy either. As soon as the cold burst of energy began to act up, it swiftly grew more and more powerful with imposing momentum. Zhong Xian felt as if his inner organs were going to be frozen solid, causing him to tremble non-stop. This won't do. I need to cultivate and assimilate the energy swiftly. Knowing that it would be unsafe for him to remain in this state, Zhongxian swiftly drove his zhenqi to ward off the cold energy while converting it into zhenqi, preparing to push for a breakthrough. What are you doing? Sensing the changes in Zhongxian's body, Luo Shenqing halted his footsteps and frowned. I need to cultivate, Zhongxian uttered, quivering from the coldness. The cold energy had already permeated the depths of his body, such that even speaking felt like an arduous task to him. He tried to use zhenqi telepathy as well, but he found that he was too busy trying to ward off the cold to divert his zhenqi away for other uses. You can always cultivate whenever you like. I have urgent matters for you right now. Luo Shenqing was still wondering what kind of important matter it was when he heard that it was just cultivating, so he waved his hands impatiently and said, hurry up and follow me. Forget it, you walk a little too slowly. I'll just carry you there. Before Zhongxian could even explain the matter, he suddenly felt his body being wrapped a surge of energy. His body suddenly flew forward as if leaping through space. There was a terrifying gale howling loudly in the surroundings, but Zhongxian could only see flickering lights around him. It was hard to tell how fast he was moving, but it seemed to be even faster than his Heaven's Path movement art. As expected of a genius from the Luo clan. Zhongxian thought. Considering how this future brother-in-law of his was Ruoxin's brother, his grasp over space was clearly more formidable than most other people. Naturally, there was no questioning his speed either. Even though Zhongxian had cultivated the heavenly art of dimension unravel and the unbounded voyager, due to the limitations of his cultivation, the average speed that he was able to move at was still a little beneath that of the other party. Forget it, I need to focus my attention on assimilating the power in the wintry spirit essence, or else I will become an ice sculpture. Knowing that this was not the time for him to be shocked, Zhongxian quickly closed his eyes and desperately processed the cold energy in his body into his own zhenqi. As time passed, the amount of zhenqi in Zhongxian's body swiftly built up, pushing him closer and closer to a breakthrough. At some point in time, while Zhongxian was still busy cultivating, his body suddenly jolted. They had finally come to a stop. Opening his eyes, the scenery that appeared before Zhongxian was not the familiar buildings of the Sanctum of Sages but an empty field. He was still sealed within the bundle of zhenqi that Luo Shenqing had wrapped around him, and the latter was standing not too far away with his hands behind his back, seemingly thinking of something. With his lips still quivering from chill, Zhongxian asked, Brother Luo, where are we? Why did you bring me here? Don't speak. Luo Shenqing exclaimed sharply. Silenced, Zhongxian was completely bewildered. The other party had brought him here without saying a word at all, and when he asked, the other party told him not to speak. Just what in the world was the other party up to? Woo-woo. Just as Zhongxian was still racking his brain to figure out his current circumstances, a sound reminiscent of the moaning of the air suddenly echoed in the area. Peculiarly, the sound seemed to echo closer one moment yet farther the next. Heh. Harumphing coldly, Luo Shenqing took a step forward. Boom. A powerful aura burst forth from him, and Zhongxian immediately saw the space before him warping due to some kind of compelling force. At the same time, his spiritual perception was also uncontrollably brought into some kind of dimension. This is the prowess of a phantasmal space realm expert. Zhongxian narrowed his eyes in astonishment. At Saint Seven Dan Phantasmal Space Realm, not only would one's dominion become harder and more unfathomable to guard against, more importantly, one would also gain the power to construct a phantasmal space. Within this area, as long as one disallowed it, it would be difficult to notice one's presence even with one's spiritual perception. This was the ability that Luo Shenqing was executing at this very moment. When Zhongxian attempted to extend his spiritual perception toward Luo Shenqing, it felt as if he was dropping a stone into a marshland. Whatever entered the space around Luo Shenqing would bizarrely vanish, leaving him unable to sense anything within it at all. He knew for sure that Luo Shenqing was right before him, but it was as if the latter had vanished from the world. No matter how he tried to perceive his surroundings, he could not find the latter. Phantasmal space realm experts were already able to control the space around them to a frightening degree. If they really hoped to conceal their presence, it would be impossible to find them, regardless of whether it was with one's eyes or spiritual perception. Unless one had reached Saint Seven Dan as well, one would be completely helpless before them. Eye of Insight. Intrigued by the prowess of phantasmal space realm cultivators, Zhongxian decisively halted his cultivation to examine the situation before him closely. Hula! The vanished Luo Shenqing appeared before his eyes once more. While his silhouette was still a little blurred, he was no longer imperceptible anymore. Boom! Under the discernment of his Eye of Insight, he could vaguely tell that Luo Shenqing was currently fighting with someone else. An immense power was diffused into the surroundings from their clashes, causing powerful shockwaves to ripple across the field. It had to be said that despite Luo Xuanqing's violent and reckless personality, his fighting prowess was not to be underestimated. Even if Zhongxian were utilized all of his current means against him, it was unlikely that he would be a match for him. Zhongxian could not help but ask, "Vicious, would you be able to defeat him in your current state?" Vicious had once said that Saint Seven Dan cultivators would not be a match for him, but it was apparent that Luo Shenqing was no ordinary Saint Seven Dan cultivator. "I can easily destroy any ordinary Saint Seven Dan cultivator, but as for that young man over there, I don't think that I'll be able to defeat him," Vicious said awkwardly. Devouring the Vicious of the northern marshlands had induced a significant rise in his fighting prowess, allowing him to match most Saint Seven Dan experts. However, as the elder brother of Luo Ruoxin, Luo Shenqing was likely a figure who stood at the very center of the Luo clan, so putting aside his superior talents, the resources that he was entitled to were bound to be top-notch. Besides, without sufficient strength, how could he become known as the King of Destruction in the Sanctum of Sages? "I thought that you have grown so strong that no Saint Seven Dan cultivators would be a match for you," Zhongxian grumbled in displeasure. Back when that fellow first regained consciousness, he bragged as if there was not a single person who would be a match for him in the world. Back then, Zhongxian had really thought that he was formidable, but looking at it now, it seemed it was all empty talk after all. Hearing the displeasure in Zhongxian's voice, Vicious' voice grew noticeably anxious. "Master, as long as you let me devour that erudition character, I'll definitely be able to defeat that fellow with ease. Add another, solidarity, in, and even Saint 8 Dan cultivators won't be a problem. And if you were to top up with another, attainment, character in, Saint 9 Dan cultivators might not necessarily be a match for me anymore. Alright, stop bragging. Don't even dream about devouring those characters, you hear me?" Zhongxian replied in disdain. Those were the treasures that Kongsha had left for the Sanctum of Sages, and they held the crucial role of sealing the luck in the land. To even dream of devouring those characters, he sure was brazen. But thinking about it again, Vicious was a figure who was able to trap even an expert like Kongsha for numerous days back in his peak, so naturally, the value of Kongsha's writing was not as significant in his eyes. Alright then. Having been reprimanded, Vicious did not dare say anything. Zhongxian turned his gaze back to the fight before him. "Haha, as expected of a genius from the Luo clan, you are indeed formidable. I'll take you up on your offer then, hula." The blurred scenery abruptly reverted to normal, and Zhongxian saw a young man of short stature standing just by Luo Xuanqing's side. To emphasize how short that young man was, he was only half of Luo Xuanqing's height, barely even reaching up to the latter's chest. His skin was as black as charcoal, but his eyes gleamed with a blinding light that seemed to warp space itself. Due to the intense battle that had transpired between the two of them earlier, the field in the surroundings was filled with huge depressions and deep gorges. If Zhongxian had not seen the state of the field before, he would have thought that he was in the midst of a mountain range plagued with treacherous terrain. That young man is a Saint Seven Dan cultivator, too, Zhongxian thought. He could not tell how powerful the short young man was at the moment, but the fact that the latter was able to clash with Luo Shenqing and even end up in a draw, it could only mean that the latter's fighting prowess was definitely not beneath Saint Seven Dan. "Who is he? Why did you bring him here?" At the same moment that Zhongxian noticed the short young man, the latter also noticed him, and a conspicuous frown surfaced on his forehead. "He is." Luo Shenqing was just about to explain the situation when the resounding call of a crane echoed through the sky. Following which, a massive divine crane descended swiftly in their direction. The divine crane was not completely white in color. Instead, reminiscent of a phoenix, its tail was filled with feathers of all colors, and if one stared at it intently, it felt as if flames were flowing through them. That's a 7-colored heaven crane, Zhongxian noted in astonishment. This crane was completely different from those buffoons he had attracted with his zither playing back when he was taking the demonic tunist examination. The 7-colored heaven crane was a lineage of saint beast that came from the ancient era, and even without cultivating, they would attain strength equivalent to a Saint 7 Dan cultivator upon maturity. The both of you sure came early. Raising his head, Zhongxian realized that there was a young man seated on top of the back of the crane. The young man was in his early 30s, too. He had a towering stature, a head taller than Luo Shenqing in fact, but his figure was rather plump. Placed next to him, Sun Qiong would look nothing more than a mere chubby child. It must be difficult on the 7-colored heaven crane to have to carry him, Zhongxian remarked internally. To be honest, be it in his past life or his current life, this was the first time he had seen someone as plump as that. Just the thought of having to carry a person that huge sent shivers down his spine. It's not that we came early, you arrived late. Come down. Luo Shenqing harumphed coldly as he raised his hand and grabbed forward. In an instant, the surroundings began warping once more. The divine crane in the sky seemed to have knocked into a wall, causing it to shake uncontrollably. Oh! Your ability to manipulate space seems to have grown significantly stronger, but you will need much more than that to hurt me. The fatty chuckled softly. Without bothering to dodge, he stepped forward powerfully and leaped down from the back of the divine crane. Hoo. Due to his weight and the momentum of his leap, it took only a moment for his speed to reach a frightening level, exceeding even the speed of sound. Catcher. His plump body collided heavily on the sealed space, and a massive crack swiftly slithered across the seal swiftly before shattering with a resounding explosion. Under the impact, even Luo Shenqing was forced to retreat several steps. Boom! The fatty landed on the ground, creating a massive depression beneath him. Chapter 1338. A group of eccentrics to this. Zhongxian's lips twitched. After reaching the transcendent mortal realm, it was already extremely difficult for a cultivator to die from falling from great heights. Considering how the fatty was no weaker than Luo Shenqing, there was no way he would have any trouble falling from such a height. However, to be able to destroy a spatial seal set up by Luo Shenqing in midair and still create such a huge depression beneath him, that was already a force far greater than smashing a mountain right upon one's head. Zhongxian could not help but think what would have happened if he had been in that fatty's place. Would he have died from the impact? That would have been a rather hilarious situation. Before Zhongxian could remain shocked for long, a plump silhouette rose up from the huge depression and shook his body. The dust that he was cloaked in fell from his clothes, and shockingly, he was completely unharmed. It was as if the person who had just fallen to the ground was not him but someone else. Zhongxian was astonished. What incredible defensive ability! After cultivating his quintuple incandescence golden body to its limits, his physical body was already on par with Saint intermediate tier artifacts. However, if he had fallen with the momentum that the fatty did earlier, his organs would have ruptured from the impact of the fall. Even if he did not die, his health bar would at least have depleted by half. This meant, in terms of physical body resilience, the fatty had already reached a level far beyond his. That was truly frightening. Who's this lad? I have never seen him before. After shaking off the dust on him, the fatty took a look at Zhongxian, and his lips cracked into a smile. Sealed on the spot, and it seems like there's something wrong with his body as well. Did this lad offend you somehow? Do you need me to crush him for you with my bottom? Well, it'll be his honor to die beneath my bottom. Black lines streaked across Zhongxian's face. Did this fatty have the same hobby as Golden Origin Cauldron, sitting on others? Fearing that the fatty would really do as he had said, Luo Shenqing quickly waved his hand and explained, "He's a person whom I have specially invited here to assist us." You specially invited him over? Looks of disbelief surfaced on the faces of the fatty and the shorty. They knew Luo Shenqing's personality very well, a proud and condescending person, a troublemaker who refused to submit to anyone. For such a person to engage the help of a 20-year-old lad who was only at leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, just what was the background of this lad? Indeed. Luo Shenqing nodded. Just as he was about to begin on his introduction, he noticed that the surroundings had, at some point, been shrouded with a light mist. Following which, an entrancing melody sounded. A melody of sorrow to mark the passing of the beautiful years of youth, replaced by tears upon one's robe. I have kept you waiting. The voice was fleeting, sounding as if it was a whisper in one's ears or a resonation within one's soul. It carried a quality that seemed to hook one in, compelling one's emotions to sway along with it. Grave looks surfaced on the faces of Luo Shenqing, the fatty, and the shorty, and they drove their zhenqi to the point where white smoke was rising from their heads, seemingly desperate to keep out the attack of the voice. Demonic tune, Zhongxian noted in alarm. Even though the effects of demonic tunes were not as pronounced on him since he cultivated the Heaven's Path zhenqi, the slightest carelessness could still end with him being placed in a trance, resulting in the breeding of inner demons. For the time being, he already had enough inner demon subordinates. Sensing that the offense of the voice was growing more and more intense, Luo Shenqing harumphed coldly in displeasure. By Hongyin, it has been long since we last met, but it seems like your means are still the same as ever. Oh, why don't you give it a try to see if they are still the same then? The tone of the voice abruptly changed to take on a more seductive edge. At the same time, the mist in the area seemed to intensify, and apparitions seemed to flash in the air, playing on the deepest fear within one's heart, making it difficult for one to focus one's attention. Sure, give it your best shot. Do you think that I'll be afraid of you? Luo Shenqing stepped forward and stomped on the ground. A resounding boom reminiscent of a drumbeat reverberated in the surroundings. A blinding burst of zhenqi erupted from Luo Shenqing, making it hard for one to open one's eyes before him. With the diffusion of the light, the mist was forced to dissipate considerably. After which, Luo Shenqing scanned his surroundings with keen eyes, and a moment later, he abruptly grabbed at the space ahead of him. A massive palm print immediately appeared in the sky, covering more than 10 mu. Immense energy coiled endlessly around his body. In that moment, it felt as if the space of the sky above had been frozen in place, threatening to collapse at any moment. Your control over space is superb. I didn't think that you would have made such huge progress since the last time we met. The demonic tune seemed to have grown a little weaker, a sign that the demonic tunist had suffered a setback in the previous clash. Of course. How could I possibly be the only one who remained stagnant? Luo Shenqing retracted his palm and returned to Zhongxian's side. Tzzzzzzzz. The mist in the distance began to gather, and a tall, slender figure slowly materialized before everyone's eyes. It was an extremely beautiful young lady. Her slim figure paired with her tall stature gave her a type of unique elegance, and this was especially accentuated by her pair of beautiful legs. In terms of height, she was even taller than Zhongxian. After cultivating the Heaven's Path golden body, Zhongxian's skin had not only become smoother than a baby's, his height had also risen to 1.8 meters. At that height, he could already be considered one of the taller ones among the males in the master-teacher continent. It was truly rare to see a lady whose height was even above his. Since everyone is here, allow me to make the introductions. As the young lady walked over, Luo Shenqing took a look around him before getting straight to the topic at hand. Zhongxian here is a freshman who enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages just a day ago. We met for the first time yesterday. Luo Shenqing, why did you bring a freshman over here? It's not as if you don't know the strength of the freshman. He'll drag us down if you bring him there as well. That place is extremely dangerous. What are you thinking, bringing a leaving Aperture Realm primary stage cultivator there? Wait a moment. If his surname is Zhong, could he be from the Zhong clan? No, that's not right. You have always hated those from the Zhong clan, so how could you be willing to work with them? Upon hearing that the person whom Luo Shenqing had brought over was only a freshman, the trio frowned in displeasure. It was no wonder they would react in such a way. They were all Saint 7 Dan experts, and yet, Luo Shenqing actually brought a mere Saint 5 Dan primary stage cultivator over. This course of action was clearly detrimental to the success of the mission that they were about to undertake. Don't underestimate Zhongshe. He might be young, but he's an incredibly talented formation master. The speed that he can construct formations at is unmatched by anyone that I know of. In fact, even 8-star pinnacle formation masters might not necessarily be a match for him, Luo Shenqing explained. Even though he was rather displeased that the young man had insulted his sister yesterday, that did not hinder the awe he felt for the young man's talent in formations. To be able to construct a grade 8 formation that he had never seen before, albeit the most basic one, in just several breaths. With this young man with them, their chances of success would be increased manyfold. Formations. Zhongxian finally understood what was going on. He had thought that Luo Shenqing had brought him over because the latter had found out about the relationship between him and Luo Ruoxin, but it was apparent to him now that he was mistaken. Most likely, Luo Shenqing required some help concerning formations for some kind of mission or trial, and recalling his incredible ability in setting up formations, Luo Shenqing chose to specially invite him over. Yes, specially invite him over. You are telling us that a leaving Aperture Realm primary stage cultivator is able to set up a formation faster than a grade 8 pinnacle formation master? Are your eyes playing tricks on you? The shorty frowned doubtfully, clearly not believing Luo Xuanqing's words at all. The other two also shot looks of skepticism toward Luo Shenqing and Zhongxian. It was not without reason that formations masters had strict cultivation requirements on one's promotion. Without sufficient strength, it would be impossible for one to set up a certain formation. Considering how Zhongxian was only at leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, it was hard for them to take Luo Xuanqing's assessment of the other party seriously. Do you all think that I'm lying? Luo Shenqing clearly looked a little displeased. I took the 8-star formation master examination with him, and back then, before I could even finish browsing through the formation blueprint, he had successfully set up the formation. If not for that, do you think that I would go through so much trouble to invite him here? He had set up the formation before you could even finish browsing through the formation blueprint. The trio was taken aback for a moment before the disbelief on their faces deepened. As a cultivator's cultivation advanced, their primordial spirit would gradually grow stronger, which would in turn further the prowess of their spiritual perception. As Saint Seven Dan experts, as long as the content was not too profound, they would be able to memorize most cultivation techniques and secret arts with a sweeping glance. Yet, for the young man to successfully set up the formation before Luo Shenqing was done browsing through the formation blueprint, it was a little hard for them to conceptualize just how fast that was. The tall lady, Bai Hongyin, casually pulled her hair behind her ear as she suggested with a smile, I happen to be quite proficient in formations, too, so why don't I assess him? Who? Before Zhongxian could even say a word, his surroundings suddenly blurred, and the seal that Luo Shenqing had placed around him vanished without a trace. He could tell in an instant that he was standing in the midst of a formation activated from a formation plate. His surroundings were pitch black, and a sinister wind whistled in the area. There was a powerful mental pressure weighing down on his mind, attempting to inflict him with a splitting headache. It seems like that Bai Hongyin lady has achieved quite a deep understanding of formations as well, Zhongxian thought. Thinking back, the appearance of the mist around them as soon as she appeared was likely to be the doing of some kind of formidable formation plate as well. It would be hard to produce such an effect otherwise. To be able to activate a formation plate instantaneously and trap all of them, it meant that Bai Hongyin's comprehension of formations had already reached 8-star at the very minimum. Bai Hongyin, what are you up to? Not expecting the tall lady to make a move on Zhongxian all of a sudden, Luo Shenqing was enraged. He was just about to step forward to stop her when he suddenly felt a tug on his hand pulling him back. Don't worry, she won't go overboard. Just let her give it a try, otherwise it'll be hard for us to entrust our safety to him later on. The person who had just spoken was the fatty. Clearly, he also harbored some reservations toward the ability of the freshman. Thus, he hoped to see what the latter was capable of through Bai Hongyin's move. This. Luo Shenqing hesitated for a moment before grumbling reluctantly in agreement. Fine then. Those who were gathered there were his close friends. While none of them were willing to submit to the other, they were very conscientious individuals, and they would never hurt others for no good reason. Luo Shenqing says that you are highly skilled in the field of formations. This is the formation plate that I had an 8-star high-tier master teacher craft for me, and if you can break out of it within 4 hours, I'll acknowledge your skills and allow you to come along with us. Unaware of the happenings outside, Zhongxian swiftly heard a voice from within the formation. Acknowledge my skills and allow me to come along with you all? Zhongxian shook his head helplessly. He was in the midst of attending a social event to interact with the other students of the elite division when he was suddenly dragged off by Luo Shenqing. It was one thing for Luo Shenqing to not explain anything to him, but before he knew it, they were suddenly trying to assess his skills. This bewildering turn of events really left him feeling deeply stifled. Does it look like I'm really all that interested in joining your group? But after taking in a deep breath and calming down, he thought through his circumstances once more, and the fact that Luo Shenqing had invited him over showed that the latter acknowledged his skills. Since that was the case, if he could prove himself worthy this time around, he might just be able to win the goodwill of his future brother-in-law. As troublesome as it would be, for the sake of Luo Ruoxin, he would just have to do it. Flaws. Having made up his mind, Zhongxian immediately leaped into action. A book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. Taking a look at the content of the book, Zhongxian clicked his tongue in disdain. What a trashy formation plate this is. There are so many flaws in it. The tall lady had said that she had specially engaged the help of an 8-star high-tier formation master to craft this formation plate for her, so he had thought that it would be some ingenious artifact. Perhaps, his expectations were simply too high from the start. I can think of 138 ways to decipher the formation. It took only a moment of calculation for Zhongxian to come up with this conclusion. After studying all the 8-star formation books over at the Formation Master Build branch in the Hall of Erudition, his comprehension of formations had already reached 8-star pinnacle. In fact, in terms of knowledge, he might even be a match for some 9-star low-tier formation masters. With his knowledge, it was a walk in the park for him to overcome a grade 8 formation plate like this. Zhongxian pondered for a moment before making up his mind. I guess I should use the most direct and fastest method to decipher the formation so as to please my future brother-in-law. After choosing the method to use, Zhongxian was just about to realize his plan when his body suddenly stiffened. To his astonishment, the meridians in his body had frozen solid. Crap, I forgot. I have yet to assimilate the wintry spirit essence. 1 mu equals 666. 67 square meters. It also equals 26. 36 square rods, whatever that unit is. Chapter 1339. What an easy lightning ordeal. Shortly after he consumed the 3 bottles of wintry spirit essence, before he could even start assimilating them, Feisha had suddenly came over to have a heart-to-heart talk with him. Following which, his future brother-in-law had suddenly dragged him to this field. While he did assimilate a portion of it on the way, there was still a lot left within him. There had not been much of a problem when he was still seated on the ground, but as soon as he attempted to draw upon his strength to break the formation, he suffered backlash. The rampaging cold energy within his body caused his face to turn ghastly pale, and his body shuddered non-stop. He felt as if his organs had turned into ice sculptures, and even driving his zhenqi became an extremely difficult act. This won't do. I need to assimilate the cold energy right now, or else I'll really freeze to death there. Zhongxian thought in alarm. He had been hoping to break the formation swiftly and leave a good impression on Luo Shenqing, but that was clearly impossible now. It was one thing for him to waste the wintry spirit essence, but in the worst-case scenario, the rampaging cold energy might leave some trauma in his body, resulting in unexpected situations with his body. Assimilate. Knowing that there was no time to waste, Zhongxian took a deep breath before swiftly gathering his Heaven's Path zhenqi together to push for a breakthrough in his cultivation. Due to the attributeless nature of the Heaven's Path zhenqi, not only was it capable of neutralizing all types of poison in the world, it could even imitate the slaughter of zhenqi unique to the otherworldly demonic tribe. Back then, not even the 10 kings of the Qingtian lineage were able to see through his disguise. Due to that, the wintry spirit essence, which even the members of the Glacier Plain Court were fearful of, posed very little threat to him. Gu 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 gu. Driving his zhenqi swiftly, his stiffened body gradually regained flexibility, and with imposing momentum, he drove his zhenqi to crash into the bottleneck, hindering his advancement. Catcher. Catcher. It took only an instant for the bottleneck leading to leaving Aperture Realm Intermediate stage to be torn through. Even after the breakthrough, the zhenqi in Zhongxian's body continued to surge furiously with imposing momentum, charging right for the next bottleneck. Zhongxian had long committed the leaving Aperture Realm Heaven's Path divine art to mind after a few hours of reading through it, and with ample spiritual energy to fuel his breakthrough at this moment, the rest was easy. Driving his growing accumulation of Heaven's Path zhenqi, it took less than 5 breaths for him to successfully overcome the bottleneck to leaving Aperture Realm Advanced stage. And 10 breaths later, he successfully reached leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle. It was only after achieving 3 breakthroughs that the spiritual energy in the wintry spirit essence finally completely sapped up. Zhongxian heaved a sigh of relief. I succeeded. As expected of a treasure from the Glacier Plain Court. It was indeed not without reason that Chen Laiyao wanted to save it for her breakthrough to the Grand Dominion realm. It was far easier to convert the wintry spirit essence into zhenqi, thus making it much easier to push for a breakthrough with it. I should just clear the lightning ordeal while I am at it, Zhongxian thought. Boom. Storm clouds emanating frightening might were swiftly drawn over. Upon achieving a breakthrough in the leaving Aperture realm, as long as a cultivator did not intentionally suppress their cultivation and conceal it, the lightning ordeal would be immediately drawn over. On top of that, the prowess of the lightning ordeal would also vary according to the strength of individual drawing it over. The stronger one was, the more formidable the lightning ordeal would be. Luo Shenqing, since you have so much confidence in Zhongxian, why don't you guess how long he will take to overcome Bai Hongyan's formation plate? The fatty asked Luo Shenqing with an interested smile. Bai Hongyan's formation plate is at grade 8 intermediate, so it might still take him quite a bit of effort in order to decipher it. At this point, Luo Shenqing paused and thought contemplatively for a moment before adding, my guess is that he will take at least an hour. Deciphering a formation was slightly easier than setting one up. Considering how Zhongxian was able to set up a grade 8 formation within just a few breaths, even if it was the most basic one, it was more than enough to show that he possessed an extraordinarily deep understanding of formations. As formidable as Bai Hongyan's formation plate was, Luo Shenqing did not think that Zhongxian would have a problem with it. Nevertheless, this should have been first time Zhongxian was coming into contact with such a formidable formation plate, so it would still take an hour or so at the very least. An hour? Heh, you are confident in him. However, my thoughts differ from yours. I don't think that he'll be able to succeed. The shorty shook his head with a sneer. It's not like you have never experienced Bai Hongyan's formation yourself. It's intertwined with her demonic tunes and soul attacks, making it difficult to focus one's attention inside. In such a state, deciphering the formation won't be easy. Even an average 8-star pinnacle formation master would require at least 6 hours in order to do so. Regardless of whether that lad inside is as formidable as you make him out to be or not, it will be impossible for him to succeed without at least 2 hours of work. The fatty shook his head. You all sure have ample confidence in that lad. My take is that he might not even succeed at all. As a Saint 7 Dan expert, he had seen plenty of formidable formation masters in his time, and he had a clear gauge of what the capabilities of a top-notch formation master were. Bai Hongyan was not just a skilled demonic tunist, her prowess in formations was equally terrifying. By pairing those two abilities with one another, her grade 8 intermediate formation could display might comparable to a grade 8 pinnacle formation. This was likely the first time that the lad inside had experienced such a formation, so it would already be a huge blessing if he could keep himself from panicking, let alone deciphering the formation in time. Hearing the comments from the duo, Luo Shenqing found his previous confidence in Zhongxian eroding slightly. It was possible that Zhongxian might really possess an extraordinary talent in formations, allowing him to identify the various cruxes in any formation and set it up in an instant. But as unlikely as it was, he could not discount the possibility that Zhongxian might have seen and practiced beforehand. He might not have seen the grade 8 primary formation used in the Formation Master examination before, but he could not say the same for Zhongxian. If Zhongxian had really seen the formation before and practiced it multiple times, it was only natural that he could set it up within a few breaths. Boom! Just as Luo Xianqing was feeling a little uncertain inside, the formation before him suddenly jolted. It seemed like there was a huge mass of power swiftly building up inside. It lasted for roughly 20 breaths before the sky above abruptly darkened. A frightening power of lightning was starting to gather right above them. They could not assess the situation in the formation due to the formation's mist hindering their spiritual perception, but the overwhelming might harnessed by the storm clouds gathering right above them caused goosebumps to rise all over their arms. What's going on? The person who was controlling the formation, Bai Hongyan, was astonished by the abrupt changes in the surroundings. She had only activated this formation to test Zhongxian's strength. It was not as if she was committing some kind of heinous crime. Why were the heavens sending lightning upon her, as if she was some kind of sinner? Surely her little actions should not warrant such extreme punishment. Bai Hongyan did not think that Zhongxian would make much progress at the start, so other than infusing her zhenqi into the formation, she did not pay much attention to the situation inside. As such, she had no idea that the young man inside had advanced his cultivation from leaving Aperture Realm primary stage to leaving Aperture Realm pinnacle within less than 20 breaths. Of course, she could not have fathomed that the lightning ordeal was summoned by the young man inside either. Damn it! Seeing that the lightning was directed toward her formation plate, ready to reduce it to smithereens at any moment, Bai Hongyan clenched her fists tightly and leaped up, launching an attack at the storm clouds. Boom! However, before her attack could strike the storm cloud, a lightning bolt roughly the thickness of a human's waist suddenly descended. Catcher! With seemingly unlimited power, the falling lightning bolt instantaneously devoured Bai Hongyan and her offense. Tzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. Bai Hongyan fell back to the ground with her body spasming now and then. Her hair was standing on end, and her face had been charred black. The elegant and seductive lady from a moment ago had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a wretched victim of a lightning strike. Even though her cultivation had reached Saint Seven Dan, her strength was still far from sufficient to stand against the imposing might of the natural world. Fortunately, her sacrifice was not in vain. The ominous clouds in the sky seemed to dissipate slightly after that powerful lightning strike, seemingly ready to vanish at any moment soon. Just as Bai Hongyan heaved a sigh of relief, another surge of energy suddenly exuded from within the formation, and upon sensing that surge of energy, the ominous clouds in the sky began gathering together once more. In just a few breaths, the storm clouds had already grown 2 times larger than before. What in the world is going on? Bai Hongyan felt a numbing sensation on her scalp, and her head felt as if it would blow at any moment. At this rate, she really felt like she would go insane. Luo Xianqing and the others were flabbergasted by the scene before them as well. They had no idea what to make of the situation. Catcher! Catcher! There was no time to think at all. Almost right after the storm clouds had formed together, a bolt of lightning immediately surged down. This time, it was far larger than before. Just the diameter was already more than 2 meters wide. With legs trembling in fear, Bai Hongyan watched the lightning bolt with a pale face. Knowing that she would not be able to avoid it, she gritted her teeth and bucked up her courage. Raising her hands, she drove her zhenqi to its maximum and sent a burst of force upward to counter the lightning bolt. Catcher! While her desperate move did manage to weaken the lightning bolt considerably, it was not sufficient to neutralize it entirely. It fell on her once more, and her body was completely charred black. The smell of burnt flesh drifted from her, and a stream of white smoke rose from her body. Due to the severity of her injuries, she could not help but spurt a mouthful of blood. I have at least managed to hold on for the time being. Bai Hongyan's knees caved in from weakness, and she fell onto the ground on her bottom. Despite her current state, she still heaved a sigh of relief. The previous bolt of lightning was extremely powerful, but judging from the magnitude of the storm clouds, 2 strikes should have depleted its energy entirely. It would dissipate very soon. But barely after this thought formulated in her mind, another surge of energy exuded from the formation yet again. Hong long long. The dispelling ominous, storm clouds suddenly gathered together once more, and this time, they were far stronger and condensed than before. The previous storm clouds only covered an area of roughly several hundred meters, but this time around, they covered roughly 5 to 6 li. Even before the fall of the lightning bolt, the crowd could feel the cataclysmic might harnessed within the storm clouds, as if an imposing dragon was hidden in their midst. It rumbled and roared, seemingly declaring its intention to reduce everything to dust. Why? Bai Hongyin could only stare at the sight above her with her mouth agape. From sheer shock, even her mind had whirred to a halt. The previous lightning bolt had nearly claimed her life. If she faced the next one head-on, there was no doubt that she would be reduced to ash, but why was it so intent on striking her? From the looks of it, it seemed like it would not rest until it had accomplished that. Knowing that she would not be able to cope with something of this scale alone, Bai Hongyin anxiously bellowed, "Stop looking at the commotion. Come over and help." "All right." Realizing the severity of the matter as well, Luo Xianqing and the others quickly rushed over. Hualala. Under the collaboration of the 4 experts, a hole was torn right through the sky. A 7-colored burst of energy clashed directly with the lightning bolt, and a deafening explosion echoed over 100 li. With the collision of the 2 devastating forces, cracks began surfacing on the earth. The faces of Luo Xianqing and the others were flushed crimson from all their exertion. They had driven their zhenqi to the extent that it felt like their bodies would burst apart. Every single one of them was charred from head to toe, and their hair was standing on end. One by one, they spurted large mouthfuls of blood. Powerful as they were, the lightning bolt descending from the sky was simply too fearsome. Even with their prowess put together, their combined might still fell slightly short of the lightning bolt. It was fortunate that they were all offspring from powerful clans or organizations, so they had plenty of life preservation means up their sleeves. Otherwise, that lightning bolt would have inflicted severe injuries on them, the kind that they would have to spend several months in bed to recover from. While the crowd outside the formation was being tortured by the lightning tribulation, inside the formation that severed one's sense of hearing and spiritual perception from the outside, Zhongxian was staring at the layer of mist above him in confusion. "After my breakthrough, the heavens should have noticed the power I am exuding and cast the leaving aperture ordeal upon me. So, why isn't it coming?" He had been waiting there for quite some time now, but nothing had happened at all. Could there have been a problem in the way that he exuded his strength? He exuded another surge of energy. Silence. He exuded yet another surge of energy. Still silence. Could it be that I cleared the lightning tribulation too easily the previous time, and now it doesn't dare appear before me again? Zhongxian rubbed his glabella in bewilderment as he continued exuding his strength. I thought that the leaving aperture ordeal would at least be as difficult as the Saint Ascension ordeal, but this is really disappointing. Catcher, catcher, catcher. Outside the formation, Luo Xianqing and the others were jolted by the lightning bolt again and again, and a stream of white smoke rose from their heads. 5 to 6 li is 5 to 3 kilometers. Chapter 1340. This is my leaving aperture ordeal. Luo Xianqing and the others might have been Saint Seven Dan experts, but they were still far too weak against the lightning that represented the might of the world. As the ominous clouds grew denser and larger, the lightning bolts also became thicker and thicker. The group of 4 was in no danger yet due to the multitude of life preservation means they possessed, but under the relentless zapping of the lightning, they still ended up being charred black. In this moment, rather than experts, they looked like wretched beggars. Having been in lofty positions ever since they got into the sanctum of sages, they had never suffered such indignation before. After suffering 4 consecutive zaps, Bai Hongyin finally reached her limit, and a furious spurt of blood escaped from her mouth. Of the 4 of them, she was currently in the most pitiful plight. She used to be graceful and noble like a fairy, but at this moment, she seemed more like a witch. If one did not look at her closely, it would be hard to even ascertain whether she was a human or not. Why does it want to strike my formation plate so badly? Bai Hongyin simply could not comprehend it no matter how she racked her mind. Why would such a powerful lightning tribulation be so intent on destroying her formation plate? It was as if her formation plate had done something unforgivable to it. She had paid a heavy price to an 8-star high-tier formation master to inscribe it for her, and she only had one. If it was destroyed, her fighting prowess would be halved at the very least. At this moment, a thought suddenly struck Bai Hongyin's mind. Luo Xianqing, could it be that the fellow in the formation has just achieved a breakthrough? The storm clouds had gathered too fast, and its might had already far exceeded the scale of ordinary leaving aperture ordeals, so that possibility did not strike her mind. However, watching as the storm clouds gathered again and again, she began to realize that something was amiss. She had used her formation plate so many times in the past, but it had never drawn the ire of the heavens before. It was only after she trapped that lad in it that the lightning bolt was so determined to destroy it. Could that really be the case? A breakthrough? That shouldn't be possible. When I met him earlier, I heard that he had achieved a breakthrough from primordial spirit realm to leaving aperture realm primary stage just yesterday. Luo Xianqing shook his head. Considering that he has just raised his cultivation by 2 cultivation stages, how could he possibly achieve another breakthrough now? Even though it had not been long since that fellow enrolled into the Sanctum of Sages, his affairs had already been spread far and wide in the elite division and ordinary division, to the point that he could nearly be considered a legend. Based on the news he had heard, the fellow had achieved a breakthrough within an interval of 10 breaths while fighting against someone else. Given so, he should not have the momentum to push for another breakthrough again. After all, cultivation was a process of accumulation. Putting him aside, even his incredibly talented younger sister had to advance a step at a time. Never had he heard of anyone who could achieve a breakthrough one day and still continue doing so the next. He achieved a breakthrough just yesterday? Bai Hongyin was taken aback for a moment before shaking her head. She had been wondering if the mess was caused by the fellow in the formation, but given what Luo Xianqing had said, that was unlikely to be the case. Are you thinking that this is the lightning tribulation he drew over due to his breakthrough? Luo Xianqing asked. That's right. Bai Hongyin nodded. Even if he did achieve a breakthrough, he would only face the leaving aperture ordeal. His lightning tribulation couldn't possibly be so powerful. Luo Xianqing shook his head, expressing his skepticism toward Bai Hongyin's thoughts. Regardless of the truth, given how the lightning tribulation is growing stronger and stronger, we'll all die here if we continue like this. Bai Hongyin, why don't you just give up on your formation plate? At this point, the shorty had also been zapped to the point where he felt like he was already on the verge of a mental breakdown. The lightning bolts that had fallen were clearly all directed toward the formation plate. As long as they abandoned the formation plate, the problem would be resolved. It really was not worth it to lose their lives over a mere artifact. You want me to abandon my formation plate? Impossible. Clenching her fists tightly, Bai Hongyin declared resolutely, it is the foundation of my strength, I'll never give it up, even at the cost of my life. Only she knew how much she had to go through in order to obtain the formation plate. She had nearly lost her life for it. How could she give it up that easily? There was no way she could accept its destruction just like that. There's no way I'll allow my formation plate to be destroyed, over my dead body. Bai Hongyin looked at the lightning gathering in the sky above, racking her mind for a solution. In this moment, a deafening explosion suddenly sounded beside her. Catcher! A powerful shockwave rippled into the surroundings, causing Bai Hongyin's already feeble body to stagger weakly. Following that, cracks began creeping across the formation plate floating not too far away from her, and with a crisp echo, it shattered in half. Pu. Watching the sight before her, Bai Hongyin's breathing hastened, and her eyes reddened in frenzy. Unable to withstand the mental blow from the destruction of her precious artifact, she spurted yet another mouthful of blood. In order to protect it, she had gritted her teeth to endure the lightning strikes, so why did it still shatter in the end? Who? Just as she was trying to figure out what was going on, the mist produced by the formation dissipated, and a young man walked out from within. All right, I have deciphered the formation. Ah! You all. What happened? Zhong Xian had tried multiple times, but he found that he was unable to call forth the lightning tribulation at all. Eventually, He could only attribute it to some kind of property of the formation shrouding him, hindering the fall of the lightning tribulation. Thus, after some thought, he used the most direct method to escape from the formation, destroying the formation plate. He was hoping to make a majestic return after escaping from the formation so as to win some goodwill from Luo Shenqing, but who would have thought that he would see a couple of charred figures instead? He had to squint his eyes before he could finally recognize them as the various experts whom he had met previously. How did they end up in such a state all of a sudden? Are you the one who destroyed my formation plate? Bai Hongyan asked with a quivering tone. Yes. There were simply too many flaws in the formation, such that I couldn't even decide which one I should exploit to escape from the formation. In the end, I decided to just go with the easiest one, destroying the formation plate. Zhongxian nodded in response. How is it? I should have cleared your test, right? While he did hesitate a little before destroying the formation plate, considering how the tall lady had chosen to trap him without any prior warning or the sort, he eventually decided that there was no reason to stand on ceremony with her either. At this point, earning the recognition of his future brother-in-law was more important than anything else. Why you? I'll kill you. Bai Hongyan roared in a craze. It was just a moment ago that she had said that she would only allow the formation to be destroyed over her dead body, but then the young man shattered it. In the face of such a situation, her rage burst forth like an erupting volcano. She raised her hand, preparing to launch a killing strike against Zhongxian. However, the next moment, a violent rumbling echoed from the sky. The storm clouds had built up sufficient power once more, and another frightening lightning bolt was just about to descend upon the world. Catcher. Despite her life preservation artifacts protecting her, Bai Hongyan's hair was still jolted up from the lightning, and white smoke rose from all around her. Even though the one who should have been undergoing the lightning tribulation was Zhongxian, Bai Hongyan's act of hindering the lightning tribulation was considered as an act of defiance against the authority of the heavens, thus incurring their ire. From the looks of it, it seemed like the lightning tribulation would not let this matter rest until it finally struck down Bai Hongyan. Is she going through a lightning tribulation as well? It was only at this moment that Zhongxian noticed the storm clouds that had gathered from all around. Lightning dragons were traversing imposingly amid the dark sky, threatening to dive down at any moment. Wait a moment, that's not exactly right. It seems like the lightning tribulation is related to me. Zhongxian was bewildered. It was a little bewildering to him why the lightning bolt was specifically striking Bu Hongyan, but when he drove his zhenqi, the storm clouds in the sky visibly grew more rampant. Without a doubt, this lightning tribulation was his. Then, realization struck Zhongxian as he widened his eyes in horror. It's not that my lightning tribulation is easy, but these guys have been blocking it all along, preventing it from falling into the formation. ********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** It was no wonder nothing happened, no matter how long he waited within the formation. It turned out that the tall lady had been sabotaging him. There was no way to circumvent the lightning tribulation, and it was impossible to find a substitute to endure the lightning tribulation for one. Otherwise, the offspring of powerful clans could simply have their elders fend off the lightning tribulation in their stead. There would be nothing for them to worry about. On the contrary, any attempts to interfere in the lightning tribulation would only cause the lightning tribulation to grow more and more powerful, to the point that the cultivator who had drawn in the lightning tribulation would be struck to death. This was also the reason none of them dared to interfere back when Hall Master Xing found himself in a precarious position while undergoing the leaving aperture ordeal. In other words, due to Bai Hongyan's interference, his lightning tribulation had grown so powerful that not even Saint Seven Dan cultivators could withstand it anymore. How in the world was he supposed to survive such a lightning tribulation? If it really fell on him, he would be dead in a heartbeat. The more Zhong Xian thought about it, the more enraged he felt. Are you sick in the mind? It's not your lightning tribulation, so why are you interfering in it? Look at what you have done. With the storm clouds that have gathered here, it's only a matter of time before you succumb to it. And once it's done with you, I'll be next. It's one thing for you to want to seek death, but surely you need not drag me down with you. At this point, Zhong Xian really felt like crying. Boom. As stifled as he was feeling, the lightning tribulation would not grant Zhongxian the time to soak in his despair. A deafening rumble echoed from above, and raising his head, he could not help but shudder in fear. The lightning tribulation had already grown to a scale countless times stronger than the Saint Ascension ordeal. The one that he had faced in the square right after the mountain gate examination back then could not begin to hold a candle to this. Even after raising his cultivation to leaving Aperture Realm Pinnacle, there was no way he would be able to survive a lightning bolt of this scale. But, only I can resolve my own lightning tribulation. There's no way I can escape from it. If I allow her to continue wreaking havoc here, my chances of clearing it will only grow slimmer, Zhongxian thought anxiously. With this in mind, he could not help but curse at Bai Hongyan once again. You crazy bastard, why in the world are you messing with something that is none of your business? Look at the trouble you have caused me. In his moment of panic, a thought suddenly came to Zhongxian. Right. Is it possible for me to see the flaws of the lightning tribulation? Compile. Zhongxian quickly willed in his mind. The Library of Heaven's Path has the ability to discern the flaws of everything in the world, so the lightning tribulation should be no exception too, right? Who? With a jolt, a book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhongxian quickly flipped it open to take a look. Ah! Why is it empty? Completely empty. There was nothing on the book at all. It seems like the Library of Heaven's Path is unable to compile a book on anything that concerns me. Zhongxian swiftly came to a conclusion. He had given it a try in the past, and he realized that anything that was directly associated to him could not be compiled as a book. For one, he was unable to compile a book on himself in the Library of Heaven's Path. Perhaps, the lightning tribulation that he faced was also considered an extension of him, so the Library of Heaven's Path could not compile any information on it either. Eye of Insight. Realizing that he could not count on his Library of Heaven's Path, he swiftly activated his trump card to analyze the lightning in the sky, hoping to find any flaws that he could exploit. At that very moment, the storm clouds had already covered up an area of several dozen li around them, and the lightning that was traversing amid them was at least 10 meters thick, reminiscent of massive dragons soaring in the sky. Every single bolt of lightning wielded strength comparable to a Saint Seven Dan. Even Luo Shenqing and the others would be injured in a direct encounter with them. Zhongxian clenched his fists tightly uneasily. With my current strength, there's no way I'll be able to withstand all of that. Under the analysis of his Eye of Insight, he found that there was no possible way he could withstand the overwhelming lightning in the sky, even with his enhanced cultivation. A sharp glint flashed through Zhongxian's eyes. But there's no other choice, I have to give it a try no matter what. It seems like I can only dash into the midst of the storm clouds, just as I did yesterday. It might seem to be a highly dangerous action to dash into the storm clouds in the midst of one's lightning tribulation, but as someone who had done so personally, he knew that it was actually much safer than waiting for the lightning bolt to fall upon one below. This was because the lightning bolt would only fall after the energy harnessed within it reached the peak, making it highly difficult to withstand. However, if one were to dash up into the storm clouds before the energy had been concentrated into the lightning bolt, one would be in a considerably safer position. Of course, this might only have been applicable to Zhongxian. For a typical cultivator, plunging into an environment permeated with lightning would still result in their body being slowly worn down, resulting in gradual electrocution to death. In a sense, that was even more frightening than facing an entire bolt of lightning at once. However, Zhongxian, who possessed the Heaven's Path Shenqi, could easily recover any damage sustained by his physical body and soul. As such, the most frightening maneuver ironically turned out to be the safest option for him. Chapter 1341 Charging into the lightning. But I'm still too weak at the moment. If I could advance my physical body and soul cultivation a little more, at least to the point where I can match a Saint Seven Dan cultivator, I would be able to overcome the lightning tribulation. As complicated as the thought process was, it took only an instant for Zhongxian to come to realize all of it. At this moment, the storm clouds were beginning to charge up energy once more after striking down by Hongyin. After spurting several mouthfuls of blood and swallowing 2 pills, Bai Hongyin finally recovered slightly from her injuries. As soon as she regained her strength, she immediately directed an antagonistic glare toward Zhongxian. It was to protect her formation plate that she offended such a powerful lightning tribulation, and yet, that fellow actually destroyed her formation plate. I don't care whether you were invited here by Luo Shenqing or not, Bai Hongyin roared furiously. If I don't teach you a lesson today, my surname won't be. But before she could finish her words, the young man opposite to her interjected with a frosty face. Shut your mouth. Zhongxian's voice was not too loud, but it was infused with the power of his demonic tunes and impartation of heaven's will. It sounded loud and clear even amid the deafening rumbling of the thunder, and it left a lingering buzz in their ears. That leaving Aperture Realm lad actually told Bai Hongyin to shut her mouth? The shorty nearly fell to the ground from shock. Luo Shenqing also widened his eyes in frenzy. As the king of destruction, he rampaged freely in the sanctum of sages, fearing not even the managerial elders. But before the Bai Hongyin, who would turn into a banshee whenever she got angry, he always made sure to watch his language and actions. Yet, not only did that fellow destroy her formation plate, he even told her to shut her mouth. Aren't you being a little too brazen? What did you say? Bai Hongyin asked with a threatening edge to her voice. The bulging, crimson eyes that glared at Zhongxian could truly send shivers down one's spine. If not for her charred face, she would have definitely been extremely frightening. Shut your trap if you want to live. Given the precarious situation he was in, Zhongxian could not even be bothered to maintain a polite front anymore. With a leap, he slowly advanced toward the storm clouds above. Hong long long. As soon as he approached the storm clouds, the lightning immediately sensed the aura he was emanating and slowly gathered toward him. Is he intending to withstand the lightning tribulation for me? Zhongxian's abrupt action had bewildered Bai Hongyin so much that she even forgot about her rage in this moment. But if even I am unable to withstand the lightning tribulation, there's no way he can survive it. Even a Saint Seven Dan expert like her was completely helpless against the devastating might of the lightning bolt above. Given that the young man was a mere leaving Aperture Realm cultivator, there was no way he stood a chance against it. Is he intending to compensate for my broken formation plate with his life? Bai Hongyin widened her mouth in shock. As this thought came to her mind, all of her fury vanished without a trace, and she even felt a little touched inside. Despite facing death, the young man still charged forward to protect her. It seemed like he was not that bad a person after all. Wait a moment, is that his lightning tribulation? In contrast to the emotional Bai Hongyin, Luo Shenqing, the shorty, and the fatty noticed that the storm clouds were swiftly gathering toward Zhongxian, and realization dawned upon them. That explained everything. It was all due to that fellow. The fatty gulped unconsciously. Didn't you say that he just achieved a breakthrough yesterday and can't possibly make any advancement today? Why does it seem like he's at leaving Aperture Realm pinnacle? That really seems to be the case. Luo Xuanqing's lips were twitching as well. Based on what he had heard, that fellow had made a breakthrough from Primordial Spirit Realm pinnacle to leaving Aperture Realm primary stage within 10 breaths the previous day, and he had spent that afternoon taking the 8-star formation master examination at the Hall of Erudition, so he should not have had any time to even reinforce his cultivation. How in the world did he manage to make a breakthrough again now? Not to mention, a breakthrough of 3 cultivation stages. Boom. Boom. While the crowd was still in a state of shock, the storm clouds had already finished gathering around the young man, and lightning energy was swiftly gathering together, threatening to spill forth at any moment to tear the young man apart. This won't do. Even if his cultivation has reached leaving Aperture Realm pinnacle, he won't be able to withstand something of that scale, Luo Shenqing exclaimed. Even with his recent breakthroughs, the young man's strength was still far too weak in comparison to the lightning energy that had gathered above. Even Saint Seven Dan experts like them were unable to withstand the lightning energy in the storm clouds, let alone that young man. He could already see the young man being reduced to ash as soon as the lightning bolt fell, and no one would be able to save him. I was the one who brought him here. I can't let him die as a result of this, Luo Shenqing uttered in panic. Even someone as domineering as him felt completely helpless before this situation. He was the one who had brought Zhongxian over, and they were also the ones who had blindly interfered with the lightning tribulation, resulting in it growing stronger and stronger. He would not be able to get past his guilt if the young man died as a result of that. Just as he was in a complete state of loss, the young man's voice suddenly sounded. "I'll deal with the lightning tribulation. If you have any physical body cultivation technique manuals or soul cultivation technique manuals, hurry up and bring them out. I need as many of them as possible." Cultivation technique manuals? Everyone was taken aback. The important thing now is to resolve the current quandary we are in, so why are you seeking cultivation technique manuals? The lightning bolt is going to fall on you anytime soon. Even if we give you cultivation technique manuals now, will you have time to study them? Seeing that the crowd was still hesitating, Zhongxian bellowed furiously, "Hurry up." Yes. They had no idea what Zhongxian wanted cultivation technique manuals for, but since he was adamant about the matter, Luo Shenqing and the others quickly nodded in agreement. Were it any other situation, they surely would have killed the other party if a leaving Aperture Realm lad dared to speak to them in such a manner. However, with the threat of the lightning bolt weighing down on them, none of them had the time or effort to bother about his attitude. They knew that they had incurred the wrath of the lightning tribulation too, and if the young man failed to clear his lightning tribulation, they would become its next victims. "I have physical body cultivation technique manuals here." The fatty flicked his wrist, and a huge collection containing several thousand books appeared before him. With just the sheer power of his physical body, he was able to knock Luo Shenqing back and shatter sealed spaces. Considering how the prowess of his physical body had already reached an extremely frightening level, it was not too surprising for him to have plenty of physical body cultivation technique manuals. "I have some soul cultivation technique manuals here." Bai Hongyan also whipped out some books. "I have both physical body and soul cultivation technique manuals, but I don't have too many of them." The shorty and Luo Shenqing took out a few books as well. It was apparent that they were all from powerful clans or organizations just by how they were able to reach Saint Seven Dan at their young age. These manuals might have been rare treasures to other cultivators, but to them, these were resources that they had no lack of. "Thank you." Zhongxian's eyes lit up upon seeing the number of manuals before him. He hurriedly scanned through them with his eyes. Hula! It took just an instant for him to collect them all into the library of Heaven's Path. Not only are there physical body and soul cultivation techniques, there are even Saint Six Dan Grand Dominion Realm and Saint Seven Dan Phantasmal Space Realm cultivation technique. It's a pity that their quantity is a bit lacking, so I'm still unable to compile complete Heaven's Path Divine Art manuals from them, Zhongxian thought in pity. Even though there were Grand Dominion Realm and Phantasmal Space Realm cultivation technique manuals amid the pile, he was still a long way from compiling the Heaven's Path Divine Art. Even if they collected them all, it would not do much to help his current situation. Forget it, I'll take a look at the physical body cultivation technique manuals instead. Zhongxian thought. Compile. His mind jolted slightly, and a new book materialized in the library of Heaven's Path. He placed his finger on the book, and the knowledge harnessed in it swiftly flowed into his mind. Success. As expected of a top-notch physical body cultivator, the books he had were numerous, and they covered over a wide range of aspects concerning physical body cultivation. Through compiling all of them together, Zhongxian actually managed to compile a complete Heaven's Path golden body. As long as he cultivated according to it, he would be able to temper his physical body to achieve a level of resilience on par with Saint High-tier artifact. Let's see if it's the same for the soul cultivation technique manuals. Knowing that time was a luxury he could not afford to waste, Zhongxian swiftly turned his sight to the other group of books that he had just collected. As a demonic tunist, Bai Hongyan specialized in soul offense. As such, she had a huge collection of books regarding souls. As for Luo Shenqing and the fatty, even though they specialized in neither physical body cultivation nor soul cultivation, as offspring of powerful clans or organizations, they still had plenty of books regarding those topics. All in all, the collection of books the three of them had numbered over 1,000. Taking out the soul cultivation technique manual he had obtained from Vicious and placing them together, Zhongxian willed, compile. A new book materialized before his eyes. Zhongxian shook his head in disappointment. I only managed to perfect the leaving aperture realm heaven's path soul art from that. Ever since the eradication of the soul oracle's lineage, there had not been any occupation or power that had been able to display prowess on par with them with regards to the soul. Even with the soul cultivation techniques that he had obtained from Vicious, he had only managed to form the leaving aperture realm heaven's path soul art. The Grand Dominion realm heaven's path soul art was still plagued with flaws, and it would be hard for him to cultivate it right now. Forget it, I should just use whatever I can get for the time being. Every slight increment in strength will mean a higher chance of survival for me. Sighing deeply, Zhongxian turned to the crowd and asked once more, do any of you have pinnacle spirit stones, jade spirit essence, or cultivation resources that harness concentrated spiritual energy? Even with the required cultivation techniques in hand, it would be futile if he did not have any spiritual energy to raise his cultivation. I have the jade pearl sap. It has similar properties to the wintry spirit essence of the glacier plain court. I have a piece of jade spirit essence over here, but it isn't too big. I have a grade 8 origin spirit pill. Upon hearing Zhongxian's needs, the crowd hurriedly took out the pills, spirit stones, and spirit essences they had and tossed them toward Zhongxian. Thanks. Zhongxian's eyes lit up in excitement. It would have taken him a great deal of effort to gather these items on any other occasion, but due to the crucial moment, the others also understood the urgency of the situation and did not hesitate to pass their resources over to him. With a sweep of his hand, Zhongxian took the jade pearl sap, origin spirit pill, and jade spirit essence and swallowed the former two decisively without any hesitation. After which, he turned his gaze back to the storm cloud and noted that the bolt of lightning was done forming and was about to strike down. Knowing that he had no time to waste, he immediately dashed into the storm clouds. What is he doing? He'll die if he dashes in recklessly like that. Everyone's body recoiled from horror upon seeing Zhongxian's actions. Dashing straight into the storm clouds was equivalent to placing oneself in the midst of a sea of lightning. Under such conditions, it was only a matter of time before one's physical body and primordial spirit wore down and dissipated into nothing. Hong long long. Zhongxian's charge into the storm clouds seemed to have angered the lightning. Countless smaller bolts of lightning swiftly gathered in the area that he had disappeared into, and it took only a blink of an eye for the entire sky to be filled with lightning sparks. It was to the extent that one would be shocked just by attempting to extend one's spiritual perception into the storm clouds. What should we do? There's nothing we can do but to wait. This is his lightning tribulation, and if he manages to clear it, it will disappear soon after. Otherwise, there's a good chance that none of us will be getting out of here alive. Luo Shenqing said with a livid face. They had all interfered with the lightning tribulation, so unless Zhongxian cleared his lightning tribulation, it would only continue to grow larger and larger until it struck down every single one of them. This was also the reason they did not hesitate to take out whatever Zhongxian demanded earlier. After a moment of silence, the fatty suddenly remarked, for a leaving aperture realm pinnacle cultivator to clear such a formidable lightning tribulation, things aren't looking too optimistic. He was known for his superior defensive ability, but even he had no confidence that he would be able to survive the onslaught of such powerful lightning. If such was the case for him, the chances that the young man would survive the ordeal were even slimmer. Indeed. Prepare yourselves. If the lightning tribulation continues its attack, we'll just have to use the ability of our bloodlines to vanquish it, the shorty said. I guess there's no other choice. The others nodded in agreement as well. The lightning tribulation might have been powerful, but they had their trump cards as well. If they went all out, it was not completely impossible for them to destroy it. However, they would sustain grievous damage in the midst of it, and that could potentially hinder the future advancement of their cultivation. Unless they were truly cornered, they would not even consider such a course of action. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.